out of gavel tonight, so I'm going to use it. Call this meeting of the Rockport Select Board to order for Monday, July 25th, 2016. Normally, I'd remind everybody to turn off their cell phones or mute them, and if you got to take it, please stand out there. One thing I'd like to do before we actually get into the minutes or into our regular agenda, the town of Rockport lost a good friend about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Anthony Hutchinson, who had been involved with the recreation committee and other events for some time.
Long-time coach, too.
And a longtime coach with like five-town football and things like that. And, you know, he had developed some kind of an infection, and it ended up taking his life. That, he was on a respirator, and the family, with his desires, pulled the plug about a week ago, Monday, and that he then donated, or he left the directions to donate his organs as applicable, and they did. So, I like to, for us to recognize the passing of this individual. And he was only 51 years old.
He's got two little kiddos.
And
they're not very old.
Yeah, and they're not really that
There is a
old.
GoFundMe
Yeah.
for the kids specifically.
That's right. There is a GoFundMe to help for the kids. But, I'd just like to recognize his passing and hope that, I know people are taken by events such as this, but this is one that is, I've known Hutch for a number of years, and he's been quite an instrumental voice in the community, donating his time and his efforts. So I'd just like to mention that.
Can I also say that he's a Marine, so he didn't actually die. He just went to hell so we can all regroup down there, us Marines, and take over when we're done.
I'm glad that you weren't in the cab, because then we'd be going to Fiddler's Green. So, but thank you. That's a very appropriate notice, because he would have enjoyed to have somebody be a little humorous on his passing. So with that, back to seriousness. We have before us the minutes from our July 18th special meeting that was with the Ad Hoc Library Committee. That was what was sent to us in the packets. Has had a few adjustments to it. I thought that Linda was going to be able to bring it, but she's otherwise been detained tonight.
Well, I got this one that says revised.
Oh.
Outside the.
As do I.
Outside the
Oh,
regular
okay. Wow.
Yeah, you should have gotten it too.
Yeah, I can tell. Because
I don't have it.
page 7.
Oh, you
yeah,
know,
yeah, I
that's
did.
Okay.
I thought,
It all looks
where's
Oh,
mine?
you still got an extra copy over there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have the revised version in front of us. I would entertain a motion to accept. These were sent out electronically to us on, I believe it was Friday, after the packets had been compiled, with the recommended changes in that.
I moved to approve the minutes of, is that November 9th? No, it's
Nope.
July 18th.
July 18th.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion on this?
I read them through when I first got them, and I thought they were fine, so I don't know what any of the.
Shows you what you
corrections
know.
were. Well, I clearly missed something, but that happens every day.
Well, no, actually, I think it was just a misappropriated or attributed quotation.
Okay, then it's probably fine.
Actually, I don't remember. I remember seeing what the change was, and it's, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Thomas Locke versus Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, thank you. Any further discussion? Yep, that's right. Then all in favor, accepting as revised?
I think I need to abstain because I wasn't
And
here.
you weren't here. Yes, you were absent. All right, so it's passed 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstention due to absence. And the next item that we have, a couple of announcements. Our next regular select board meeting will be on Monday, August 8th. We will stream it. That one is going to be devoted primarily to the library, ad hoc library planning committee making their recommendation to us on how to proceed with the building of the new library. I'd also remind you that tomorrow night, 6:30 PM, over at the wastewater treatment plant in Camden, we have our next joint meeting with the Camden Select Board.
Do we have an agenda for that meeting?
Actually, no, I haven't received
I
one.
haven't, I sent out your suggestion and a couple others to Pat today. I haven't heard back. So I think one of the things was Owen's thing about the taxi.
Yes.
That seemed like it was be a police thing, and the other one was basically to report and discuss, the progress on the police department. I think that's what we've
That's
seen.
at 6?
6:30.
6:30.
Yeah.
Bill, could I ask a question? On this August 8th meeting, I know you said it's primarily for the library.
Yeah.
Is there the potential of adding on a solid waste agenda items depending on how our meeting goes on
Yes.
Wednesday? Okay.
Yes, that will be, depending on the Wednesday outcome, there may be an item, and that would be covered under old business.
Thank you.
So, and actually, I have a draft of the agenda already, and I'll be sending that out in the next day or so. Some announcements. I'd like to remind everybody, particularly those at home, there is a special election for the Maine School Administrative District 28 Director, who also concurrently serves on the 5-town community school district. That election will be Tuesday, August 2nd, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and that'll be over in the town office, the Richardson Room. Encourage people to really come out. The town clerk's office will be closed on Wednesday, August 3rd and 4th, as they relocate to the Richardson Room, which leads to the next announcement, which is the town clerk's office is being temporarily relocated to the Richardson Room, so the area that they currently occupy, plus the entry, can be refurbished, rehabbed, and a new entry door system can be installed. And then there is also going to be on November 8th, the regular election, plus we will be holding an election to fill out the term, the remaining 2 years of the library committee, Stephanie Lash's term. So that will also be on that one. More information will be coming forth about how to take out applications for nominating petitions. That should be out in the next week or so, information about that. The normal agenda contains the committee openings, and I won't go through them tonight. Do we have any agenda changes that we'd like to
No one there.
have
They
tonight?
canceled it. This is 10.
Hearing none. Public comment. Public comment should be directed at issues not under discussion on this evening's agenda. Comment from the public will be welcome prior to each agenda item. Further comment will be granted only by permission of the board, and all public comment should be brief and to the point. Do we have any public comment this evening? Hearing none. The town manager's report, which we have before us.
Yes, Bill, the manager's report, you have copies, everybody has copies, it's posted on the website, and one of the things we're trying to do, and we'll be trying to get other boards to do the same, is the town's calendar page. Now, if you go to the date of today's meeting, you will see the live stream link, so people can go to the calendar, click on that, you'll get the live stream link, and you can get right to that. As also, you'll be able to get the agenda, the town manager's report, and all of the backup data and everything from your packet is all available, so people can sit and watch at home and follow along. So the manager's report, the Opera House plantings, I wanted to comment and thank Dave Jackson for his expert advice in helping us select the right plantings and get the entranceway to the downstairs here. You all have noticed, I'm sure, the new arborvitae that have been planted and the landscaping that was done. You know, our our highway guys are good at digging holes and building roads and that kind of stuff, but when it comes to selecting plantings, it's not in their wheelhouse, so to speak, so any help we get from Dave is greatly appreciated. He's been very helpful over the past years, helping us navigate those kind of decisions and making sure that the plantings are done well. He worked with Farley and Sons Landscaping to get that done. Actually, got us a really good deal on the pricing. So, and also, I don't know if people have noticed, but the two planters in front of the Opera House, the Garden Club did a really nice job this year on getting those plantings done. Last year, it was kind of a mess because we were doing all the work on the Opera House, the front and painting and all that, so it wasn't really a job that we got on. But this year, it certainly pops out at you that it's a really beautiful entrance now, so that's going well.
Yeah.
And I wanted to thank them for that work.
Before we move on, I want to echo the thanks to Farley and Son for the efforts that they have made, and to the Parks Committee. They have also taken on themselves to work to make sure that the new plantings along the edge here, the Globe Arborvitae, are watered on a constant basis. So they're actively involved in making sure those
Right.
plantings take.
Yeah, it's been great. I've got an ant who came in the door here. The infrastructure projects, as you can see from my notes, the School Street project is underway. It's proceeding slowly. We're hitting more ledge than we had hoped, and so it affected the installation of the water lines, but then it's also affecting the installation of the drainage lines, because they don't, those lines don't go in the same hole. So we have to ram hoe out places for the drainage, and also on the School Street side, the catch basins are significantly bigger and deeper than they used to be, so they have to go down even further to make sure that we get the drainage done correctly. So it's taking it's taking longer, and we're behind schedule that way, but we're getting everything done that we need to get done, and the goal is that when it's completed, we'll have a project that wasn't piecemealed together. It will be done correctly.
Any feel on how the neighbors are doing with it?
It's fine.
As,
Well, good, as long as we have a good report from the neighbors.
yeah, as Jan said on Summer Street in one of his emails, the temporary deafness has been improved. There's been a plus side, because his ear infection has caused the temporary deafness, which means the plus side is the construction doesn't bother him as much. But
Actually, along those lines, I want to comment quickly that I did get an email from a resident about School Street, and I want to just say that I forwarded it to the town manager, and he and Mike, the Public Works Director, responded very quickly to that, and so that type of service to our citizens is
Good.
much appreciated.
It's inconvenient. It's very inconvenient for the people who live in those streets, as Jeff will attest to. It's a lot. There's a lot of work going on, but we're doing a lot at the same time. While we're there. If we're going to mess up your life, we might as well mess it up totally and get it all done and be done with it, rather than mess it up 2 or 3 times in the next 5 years. So, we have a similar problem on School Street as well, because of
Church Street.
Summer Street, I'm sorry, Summer Street. Similar problem on Summer is the amount of ledge we're hitting. It's to be expected, but it just means we have to spend more time. It slows down the process, because not much else can go on while they're digging the ledge. Because of the way the construction has to happen, they have to keep portions of the road open, so they can't just close off the whole road and just work there steadily. It's got to be open and closed and open and closed, but we're making headway. The high sidewalk is in the same place it's been. It's due to start in September. We're still waiting for CMP to relocate the poles, but it's actually Fairpoint to relocate the poles. They're Fairpoint poles. CMP will help when doing the whole relocation.
Yeah. This morning, when I was heading south, I noticed there were a number of Fairpoint trucks in what used to be Fuller Chevrolet, with obvious boring equipment, and one of them had a big, huge, long pole on the back of it, and I was wondering if they were here doing that
I
work?
didn't see evidence of that today.
Yeah, I
And
didn't
Mike
either.
didn't say anything to
I
me.
know they did a couple of polls in Camden last week, and there was another pole lying on the ground on Union Street going into
Yeah.
Camden.
Yeah, they-
So they're in the area, at
Yeah.
least,
Mhm.
doing that type of work.
The good news is the Mill Street Bridge project, they did get the poles moved there and all the power lines. Once they were in there and did the work, it took them less than a day to move everything. And so the Mill Street Bridge project is going along very well now. You know, and the pole relocation isn't holding us up, and the culvert has all been exposed. I think Mike said they're ready to pull the culvert out. I think the new culvert has been delivered. And so we're moving along very, very well on that. The reschedule of Pascal Ave is still on schedule for after Labor Day weekend. The
Resurfacing.
resurfacing, right, which will fall in line with right when we'll be doing the high sidewalk. The West Street extension, sidewalk extension is due to begin in the next couple weeks. I don't know if you've noticed out there, the orange lines that are painted on the road. It's all been designed and it's been laid out. I think DOT is making a couple comments. There's been a couple emails going back and forth from DOT. What people will notice when that goes in is the road will get significantly narrower because the sidewalk is going to be pretty much in the travel way. So in a sense, I mean, people will be bothered by it because it'll be narrower, but it'll force people to slow down coming down that road. Because they do come off of Route 1 through Route 90, and they're boogieing through that.
Hell bent for leather.
Yeah, and so this will slow them down, and it will slow them down. And the other challenge will be is our plow drivers to make sure that they get used to the fact that there's a sidewalk there. So the library AC unit, given the heat wave we've been under, I believe that unit was being installed. I know the wiring was done, and they were supposed to have done it last Thursday and Friday. I haven't heard whether it's in or not. And Ben is back from his vacation just in time for the book sale, which was another huge success. The planning and community development, the ORC, the first session of the ORC was held and finished in one session, according to Ken, right?
That's right.
It's all done?
It's, yeah.
I'll have more in
Yeah,
liaison
right.
reports.
Okay.
And Jamie's been working on the Conservation Commission grant stakeholder workshop and beginning the TIF information stuff. Scott is out on vacation. The fire department has been very busy. We've had more than our share of accidents. I think I saw there was yet another one out on, in Rockville on Route 17, and that long stretch there this weekend. Also, the chief has been working hard on the safety program, getting all the departments, trying to work on getting all the departments shape certified. So that's moving forward. General assistance, I know Stacy's been, in this time when you would think general assistance wouldn't be that big a deal, we still have clients coming in. It's housing now. So we still do have, still do have a fair number of clients coming in.
Can I ask a question, Rick? Is that lack of finding housing or
Yes.
lack of finding affordable
They
housing?
lack of finding any housing.
Any
They-
housing,
They need
okay.
some kind of housing. And, I mean, it's dropped off considerably, but she still has 2 or 3 cases a week that, you know, we can't help everybody, but they come in, they're looking for help.
You gotta do something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mentions poverty abatements in the
Yeah.
report, but we haven't seen
Yeah.
any coming to us.
but it will, I think it's coming.
Okay.
There'll be, I think that one's coming. CIP we're working forward on that. That's been a big part of what Megan's been doing, as well as budget stuff. Megan and I have talked one of the big things that we'll be working on as we move forward with the library is the kind of analysis of, what are the predicted costs? Those are the things that everybody's gonna wanna know. And so Megan will be a big part of helping us establish, because the longer the numbers sit unanswered and, as unknowns, people will just fill in the blanks. But if we're able to say, here's how much it costs, that will help move it forward. Public Works has been busy as usual. They're always trying to keep up. One of the challenges for them is that they because of the winter, even though we didn't have a lot of snow, they still had a lot of comp hours. So typically, we have at least one person out every day of the summer, and some days we have two making up for comp time. So they've been busy with brush cutting and drainage and culvert work. They did a big culvert replacement. I think it's over on West Street Extension. There's a really low spot in the road there. That the culvert there were several culverts in there that were in terrible shape. So with the new excavator, they were able to get in when the water's low, and that work was done. And that takes time, and it takes most of the guys to do that. The hope is that they can get on, if you've noticed, we've had several complaints about the crosswalk painting. The hope is that we can get on that here soon. What happened the last time, it was scheduled that the main person that does the crosswalk painting, the person that has the best eye, was out sick for a few days, which is uncharacteristic for him. He's not somebody that is out sick a lot or ever. And then we ran into problems with the high humidity. The paint doesn't like to dry. So, and then if we have expected rain, so I don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow, but if they get a couple hours of decent weather before storms, it's okay. We're hoping the paving bids are due back on the 27th, and we'll hopefully get that started, the work done on that. Police, a lot going on in the police department. I'm not gonna go through all of this. But bottom line is, a lot of good things are happening. The two towns working together has been a benefit to both towns. I think in both cases, the additional supervision has helped in both towns working together. There's several cases here where, having the backup we always have had the backup of Camden police officers, but having it look, as far as the supervision goes, look like it's one department. The officers are much more open to paying attention and having the same using the same radio frequencies. They hear the calls. There was a case at the hospital where there was a call in the emergency room. They needed assistance, and the officer, we only had one officer on duty, and the officer in Camden heard the call come in and wasn't responding to anything else, and he went and got there shortly, within minutes after our officer got there. And it was a good thing, because it took those two officers plus several more people at staff to control the situation, which, if we had one officer show up, it may not have been that good. There's been a lot of things that the chief has been working on. As you can see in my report, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. We're working on training and upgrading equipment to make sure that the officers have the equipment that they need. And also, last week, the Camden officers covered about 10 hours of patrol time for our guys, so that they've been months without having a day off, and they of every week having lots of overtime. And so having the Camden officers just 10 hours helped them out immensely, so that the guys could get like a normal weekend to themselves. Or
Have we had any progress on applications for the vacant position?
Yes, we have, and no, we haven't. I can't go into it a whole lot.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wondered
Yep.
how that was going.
Yep. Right now, we're staffed that we're okay. I mean, if we lost an officer, we'd be in trouble. And Camden would help us and help cover. But right now, we're able to do it with a little bit of support from Camden. And it's working out okay. But, we want to make sure that when we fill the position, we fill it with the right person and not just
Absolutely.
put a body in there. Town clerk, tax collector, Linda's gearing up for that election on August 2nd. We're taking bets on how many people actually show up and vote. We're not thinking it's gonna be,
Well, on that topic, again, to the folks listening at home, I would encourage anybody who is on the ballot and who wants to serve to try to get the word out so that we get people in and have a successful result. And secondly, if there's anybody who wants to serve but who is not on the ballot, we can have write-ins as well. So if there's anybody out in town who would like to serve on the school board, it would be really good if you could let at least a few of your neighbors know so that we can have an election where we have a final result.
I'm
There are-
not gonna out this person here, but you spoke to someone who's thinking about it.
I did.
Okay,
And-
that's good.
And there's one other person who's being thought about, but may not necessarily know that people are
You
doing
guys just don't want to get elected yourselves.
No, that other person is totally independent of any
Okay,
efforts from me.
good, well, that's good to know.
in assessing the inspections, Kerry has been doing a lot of inspections, and here's another example of where the two towns working together. We've had Caitlin in helping, and so the inspections are going much quicker and much more thoroughly. So that's working out very, very well. I think both towns are benefiting by that. And lastly, the parking in the harbor is becoming an increasingly more difficult problem. Abby's been working with PD and Public Works to come up with methods. I think the plan is we will have a several-pronged approach to parking. We will start ticketing illegal parkers, people who are parked on the grass, people who are parked in the, illegally in front of the yellow no parking area. Curbage, and, we have cases of people literally driving down the walkway to the bridge to park down there.
Pretty creative.
Yeah, and so one of the things we're gonna do is also paint the challenge is we don't wanna litter the park with a bunch of signs that say 2-hour parking, but give the police officers enough, that we'd notice people well enough that they can write parking tickets. So one of Randy's approaches is to put a 2-hour parking sign on the pavement coming down the hill in great big letters, instead of having signs every 50 feet marking 2-hour parking.
So is that just the police officer's eyeballs and recollection?
No,
Do we have
no.
a chalk stick?
Yeah,
We've got
we-
the chalk stick, people go through and do the rounds.
What will happen is, and it's really, the time period that it's the worst is from about 10:30 in the morning until about 1:30 in the afternoon or 2. And it will mean that one of the harbor people will go out and mark cars, and then when the police come through at 12:30 or so, they'll just start writing tickets. Randy's approach is that they will, the first go-round, they will just be giving people friendly warnings and just saying, we're gonna start ticketing people here. And then after that, it will be a ticket, and people will not be happy, but you can't get down there, and it's dangerous at times because there's so many cars down there. And then you sit there and you look across at the parking at the north side, and it's only half full. I mean, more people are using it. There are more people using it, but we're working on that piece. And lastly, the harbor is now set up and taking credit cards, and it works they've gotten they're working on the bugs, which I think we haven't seen any real bugs after we got it's set up, correct? And it's people are really pleased with it, and and it's working fine. So in concert with that is the credit cards, and everything's being done on Trio through our, our software program. Now, the cash out has to, in order to make all that work, the cash out has to be done daily. And so all that cash has to come to the town office every day, which has been a challenge in the past. But this kind of is the impetus to get that done, because you can't make all the magic work with Trio unless you have the cash to put in. So, so that's working out pretty well. So we'll have the rest of the summer to work through that, and then we'll work into the next departments.
Jeff, you,
Yeah,
okay, you want to say?
actually, 3 questions. Is end of day for the harbor later than end of day for the office? I mean, will they be taking stuff at 7 o'clock at night if,
No,
for
no.
merchandise?
They
They
leave
five
at 5.
anyway, okay. So my 2 questions, they don't have to be addressed right now, I just wanted to start the conversation, had to do with parking on Central Street. And if you go outside right now, you'll notice that there is a wonderful distribution of cars with about 6.5 feet between each car for about 10 cars in a row. And it's my opinion that if we put in demarcations for cars, it's a guidance. It's something for people to aim for, rather than this, oh, why, look, here's 2.5 things. I'm gonna park right in the middle of this thing, and I'm gonna take up what amounts to 2 or 3 spaces. So I would urge our new temporary police chief to have this on his list of possibilities. And if that's a go, then have the guys with the paint out there, because
I agree.
it really would help the density, and would help the just the frustration of seeing somebody do just an incredibly human but stupid thing to do.
If I could echo that, a sort of a alignment issue, that maybe if we could paint the line down, which would be a certain number of feet off the curb, so when people pull in, they can see that they are close enough to the curb instead of parking way out in the middle of the street, which I saw a couple cars.
Well, this
Because-
you
particularly
talking about
because
me?
it is no, I'm not, because you're parked up over,
Oh, yeah.
away from here. But, because of the curve and the street, it's sometimes hard for people to judge the distance that they are off of the curb, and if we have that extra white line on the inside, or the outside.
Just to waste time, because I know we're gonna get out of here before midnight.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little mini in MG. Who makes the minis? Is that MG or is that Morris? Anyway, there's a mini out here who is Mini Cooper, who is their butt end is like right out in traffic, and they're the
I'm not
smallest car.
pointing out
I am.
individuals, but because I've seen it during the day too.
Right.
But it is a good thing to see the cars parked out there.
The restaurants are doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I like that. Give them some guidance.
Yeah, you had another one.
I combined 2 into 1.
Oh, okay. Okay, on.
I do. I have 2 questions. One is Caitlin on assessing. Super duper happy. I know that we approved Carrie for the 2 towns. I thought that there was going to be something to approve Caitlin for the 2 towns. Did I miss it?
We're just paying, that's not part of the interlocal agreement. It's just, we just pay her for her time when she comes here.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
and it's working out great.
No, and I'm happy about that. I just didn't know if something was gonna. And then the other thing is under police, you didn't address it, but we were addressing a serious safety issue with 2 of the 3 cruisers, and I'm just curious, how did we drop the ball on that one that it became a serious issue when we could have just stuck some lights on the sides? I'm confused. How did this all of a sudden become serious when no one knew about it yesterday?
It's,
Or do you not want to talk about it?
We have a new chief that is looking at things. Every time you have new eyes, you have, there's a new way of looking at everything. So you see things differently. So,
Okay. Well,
Okay.
we will rotate those out as the time comes.
yes.
And this is just so when you pass through an intersection, you're visible on left and right instead of just front and back.
Broadside.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions of the town manager? Then I'd move on to unfinished business. The first item is we have the vote to accept and approve the revised bylaws for the Rockport Opera House. They were presented to us in the packet. I went through them and I said, wow, these people did a heck of a job coming up with this.
Like it was hard one.
Yeah.
So, I'm totally gonna copy and paste this for recreation.
That's
Thank you.
fine.
That would be fine. I mean, they have an excellent mission statement with a description of what they're doing, how the membership is set up, and all of that, so.
My only comment was on the meetings, setting the meetings in the bylaws as the second Monday of each month at 8 AM. It's nice to have a regular meeting, but I don't necessarily know that you want to have it in the bylaws, because if the committee turns over and then 8 o'clock in the morning on the second Monday is not good for half the committee, then you have to amend the bylaws to change it.
Well, they do go on to say, or on such a date,
I know.
regular or irregular, as the committee agrees upon.
I know, but it's just I'm not gonna vote against them for that, but it's just, in general, in the bylaws, unless there's a statutory reason to have a meeting on a certain date, it's probably better not to be so specific. You could certainly in the bylaws say a minimum of 6 meetings each year, and that's a good thing, but,
Okay. Other comments before we take a motion?
How much thought went into the January meeting shall be for the review and recommendation of the Opera House budget for the coming fiscal year? Is that a good, so when I jack these for the Recreation Committee, January's the month to do budget stuff?
Wait,
I would think it'd be no later
No
than
later
January.
than.
I think earlier might be better, quite honestly.
I would think December,
Okay.
Yeah.
the very latest.
Okay. Would you point me, oh, I see it. I see it. There it is. Okay.
but what was happening in the past, they didn't have anything in there,
Yeah.
so having a date is better than no
Yeah.
date.
Reminds them. Yeah, I think it's great to have the reminder in there.
Because what was happening was there was no information, so we just stuck numbers in.
I think, I mean, when I wrote that, it was freshly after we had sort of created an internal calendar anyway. It's like, oh, we need to. So that was sort of like the ultimate reminder, that, the 3 meetings before that would be heavily skewed towards the budget anyway.
Yep. Looking up when,
Oh, review and recommendation. That's your final meeting to
Yeah.
review all the stuff you did the previous 3 meetings. Gotcha.
Yep.
Being
That
an
works.
attorney's son, I
That works.
place a lot of
we're not holding that against you, Jeff.
emphasis on each word.
Okay.
on
And
each
as a
syllable.
stonemason son, I don't understand a stinking word you say, my friend.
Okay. I'm gonna get you guys back online here. Do we have a motion to accept as presented?
I move to approve the Rockport Opera House Committee bylaws, approved May 9th, 2016.
Second.
Moved and seconded. You, Jeff, I take it, have heard the comments and will relay them back to your committee?
Who would dearly love to revisit these.
No, I don't, I don't think they need to.
No, I don't
think-
I don't think so
With the
either.
idea
It's
that
just-
they do need to bring it.
Yep.
They're
Yeah,
not,
they can-
none of them are
yeah.
deal breakers for me,
Yeah.
but just for future, and to do for the Recreation Committee.
Yeah.
And for, actually, I have to do some too.
So, further discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of accepting? That is done. Our next item, I wanted to put forward to us the idea that we may need to call a special town meeting toward the end of August. This is dependent upon what goes on at the Midco Solid Waste meeting this Wednesday evening. I will be very upfront about it. I'm gonna push to suggest to all of the towns that we hold special town meetings to vote on the idea of MRC Fiberite being the receptacle of our solid waste, because the deadline is the end of August. And they were very clear to me and to Owen when we were up there for their board meeting early in the month, that if you don't do it, that's it. You can come in as a later, but you're gonna pay the penalties that have already been set forth.
There's 2 separate penalties.
Yes, there
Per
are.
ton and the fact that you don't get.
You don't get any
the rebates.
benefits.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was like a
Yes.
2.25 extra per
Yeah,
ton,
2
roughly.
Yeah, 221, $2.21
rebates.
per ton. Now,
Right.
could be more in the future. And just to the idea, we had a vote in June, and 3 of the 4 towns turned down the contract with EcoMaine. Let's have the vote to see if they're willing to accept MRC Fiberite. If they're not, then we know well exactly what we're gonna be up front. That we're gonna have to find a place to do it, and may have to revote either, EcoMaine or take a vote on PERC or some other solution, so, yeah, it's gotta move. We can't just sit here and not do anything. So I wanted to bring that up here, just so that we are aware of what's going on. And that might be an item on our August 8th agenda. I have scheduled, in case it's needed, the use of this room on August 10th, if Midco Solid Waste needs to have another meeting, which means we might need to have an emergency meeting after that, if they haven't made a decision this coming Wednesday.
This board would have a meeting after
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Because,
And
Yep.
would you, I don't have the timelines on putting things to special town meeting. Does that still give us enough time post August 10th MSW meeting?
To call a special town meeting of the type where we all show up in person.
So we would have an
7 days.
emergency meeting on like the 11th or the 12th or something to set the special town meeting?
Yes.
And it would be before the 30th?
Yes. For a special town meeting where you all show up in person, it's a 7-day notice.
Okay. That's not
That's
bad.
what the state law requires. If it's gonna be a secret ballot, a whole different bunch of
'Cause you gotta
rules,
print it
and we
out
would be
and all that
way
stuff.
out of line of being able to get it done, so. Anybody, any further questions of me on that? Where we're going? Okay. We have no public hearing this evening.
Mr. Chair, we had the letter,
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry. Yes, I had prepared a letter, and Ken here is proposing a slightly different variation of it. He has presented, we had in our packet the version that I suggested. Ken has provided to us tonight the alternative. Ken, I would ask you to delineate what the differences are that you,
well, I think, first of all, I'm all for haste in getting this, dealt with. But I think my main problem with the letter that was presented was that it was pushing for Fiberite. And I know that's your position, and that's okay, but I think the Midco Solid Waste Board, the last meeting, voted to gather more information, and so I wanna push them to act quickly, but I wanna say, look, this is, as you decided last meeting, to gather more information. Let's consider the information. The letter that's in the packet really doesn't seem to talk about considering new information, just says, go for Fiberite, in my opinion. So that's why I rewrote it the way I did, which says, yes, we want all haste, and mentions the new deadline, and says we want to have a new recommendation an updated recommendation, I'm calling it, because it's entirely possible that depending on what information comes in, that some people are swayed more toward Fiberite, or maybe some people are swayed the other way. We don't know. So the thrust of my letter is really acting quickly to come up with an updated recommendation without trying to be quite so pushing one particular recommendation.
so here's my question. At some point, the warrant has to be written. And you generally don't say A, B, or C.
Right.
So at some point, each of the towns need to say, are we gonna do X? And the most
The
time.
same X, right?
Yes, the
all
same
towns have
X.
to-
Well, that's exactly right. And the most time-sensitive one is, are we gonna do Fiberite? Because the others, they'll take our money, they're overflowing anyway, they'll just put their money in their back pocket. So it's not inappropriate to say we need a vote on Fiberite because that is the deadline coming up. And the other thing that would be a total shame is that if the question then became a reiteration of, do you want Eco Maine? Again, a no vote is not a positive vote to go ahead and do fiber rights. So, so in the end, if we have any rushed inside of the month of August special election, it has to be a referendum, if you will, on fiber right. So I understand Ken making nice and saying, let's not,
It's following the,
Let Ken.
but
Yeah.
in the end, I think everybody who's thinking about it knows that it has to be a referendum on fiber right. So if you call for a vote, you're essentially calling for a vote for fiber right.
Okay. I'd like
Unless
to-
I'm missing something.
Well, I don't think you are, but I'd like to interject at this point that when I put it on the agenda at this point, I anticipated it to be a much quicker decision than it appears that we're going to be doing. The reason I'm saying this is that we have someone here who is waiting patiently to be appointed to the planning committee. And I was wondering if it would be possible that maybe we want to just put this on hold for a few minutes to deal with his application.
Yeah, let's do it at 11:30 when we're all pissy. I'm totally cool with that. I'm
You know,
actually being honest. It's great.
You know, I object to your language, but I don't object to your sentiment.
I move to amend the agenda to table this item of unfinished business regarding municipal solid waste until after item C under new business.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. I'm going to ask for that we have no discussion, and all in favor? Very well.
That's power.
Mr. Look, I've met you in the past, I know, and you told me how to pronounce your name, and I have completely blanked on how. If you would come on up here to the podium, because we do have your application in front of us, and I have to admit, this is quite a complete application. And
Oh, thank you.
to include, you've even included your resume on this. And as I recall, when I met you before, you discussed your potential enthusiasm for joining the planning board, and I will admit, I didn't even have to come out and twist your arm again.
No, you didn't. It's kind of tough. It's La Qualia.
Oh,
G silent. No G's
Oh, all
no
right.
G's in Italian.
very good. Well, Mr. Qualia, we have your application before us to serve on the planning committee. Do we have any questions of Mr. Qualia? Louis?
It's totally a sideways question. What does Rock Coast Rentals rent?
I'm sorry.
What does Rock Coast Rentals rent? Oh no, I'm sorry, that's John, that's John's,
I was
not
going to
yours.
say, yeah.
I was thinking you were doing construction, no, that's John's email, never mind.
Oh, okay.
I'll be waking up shortly now.
Yeah, well, John Alexander
Right.
endorses enthusiastically.
Well, the only comment is we're glad to have you volunteer to serve. That's the planning board is an important board in town and requires a lot of work and dedication.
It's something I've done in the past, where I came from in Kettering, Ohio. I worked directly with the city. I handled, I don't know if you saw there, I worked with a program, At-Risk Kids. But in the high school, we did a construction trades program. And our project was to revitalize an entire neighborhood. And it was a labor of love because the kids had to actually sit down and do it with guidance. And that was, I worked on like 4 other planning projects, So,
I think sometimes too,
Semper
somebody
Fi.
coming in from,
Semper Fi.
yeah, so
I think somebody coming in from away often will have a new set of eyeballs on things that we have always done a certain way, and that can be helpful in some cases too.
Owen, Brendan, questions, comments?
I think you're overly qualified for this. I really look forward to.
easier than I thought.
Well, I'll move to appoint Louis LaQualia to the planning board with a term expiration of June 30th, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? No? Do you have any questions of us?
Not really. I mean, I've been at many of the meetings. You know,
Always a good way of finding out what you're in for.
yes, yes, you know, me and my wife's from Farmington area. Her whole family is. I'm from Ohio. Yeah, and we vacationed up here quite a bit, and then we spent the last probably 9 years before we retired traveling up and down the coast, and we picked this area. I liked it because of its, as I call it, old-fashioned charm. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, getting out of Ohio as fast as I could.
And I suspect that John will utilize your expertise. He's, as I reported last month, he's really sort of actively having each member of the board usher a particular project through. So, you know, trial by fire and all that good stuff.
Okay, thank you.
On that,
Rock and roll.
I should have mentioned earlier, we are gonna have that board tune-up the last Thursday in August, put on by the new town attorney. Boardsmanship, what you should do, shouldn't do, kinds of minutes that should be taken depending on the board, with the decision, you know, the hope, really, that the chair and the vice chair of each board be there, but in the case of like the planning board, the ZBA, our quasi judicial boards, that as many members of the board should plan on attending that day, that evening. And, you know, it probably will be here because of the need for space. So with that aside, I'm gonna now call for the vote on the motion to appoint. All in favor? That is good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Good to see you again. We can now go back and, what?
Got that one we skipped.
Well, we'll come back to that one. That's just a perfunctory item. Let's now go back to our discussion. Because you know, and the reason I said, let's go back to this discussion as opposed to dealing with the reserve account policy, because that's gonna be another long, I think, discussion.
Reserve account policy?
Item E under new
Surprise,
business
surprise, surprise.
says, review the reserve account policy.
I thought you guys worked on this stuff together.
No, I thought, you said this was just a perfunctory discussion on the
Maybe it
reserve.
is, maybe it isn't. But we're gonna go back to where we were in discussing
Got his trench coat on.
the Midco Solid Waste recommendation and
Do
what
you-
we want to send to them.
Do you guys have some concern that if neither of these letters are sent, that they are either not aware of the looming deadline or not going to act quickly enough in order to address the looming deadline?
I don't really have that fear. When I drafted this, I wanted to try to put to them the same urgency that Lincolnville tried to put to the board when the Lincolnville took or wrote their letter after all the other three towns had voted
Right.
to suggest Lincolnville has voted in favor of EcoMaine. Please hear our voice and come back to us with that question again. And I was saying that, you know, my intent here was, let's put the emphasis right now, because there is a deadline, on, let's take the vote. Do our citizens want MRC and hence the fiber right option or not? Because right now, we don't know.
Ken, can you point out specifically where it is in the letter that was in our packet that you feel expressly favors?
Well, I think,
Fiber
end of the second paragraph, for the member communities to hold special town meetings and agree to send our municipal solid waste to the MRC Fiberite facility. I mean, that's a direct request for that particular option for me. And I think that, I mean, the Midco Solid Waste Board at their last meeting voted to get more information, and I think that's what they're gonna do at their next meeting. And if we send this letter, then we're saying, well, it doesn't matter what the new information is, vote for it anyway. And that's what bothered me about the letter. I fully agree with the urgency. I fully agree that we have this deadline and we have to go through it, but I want the process to play out. I want that new information to come in, and if it's new information that's compelling, that helps change some minds, that's fine, but it's possible the new information could sway some people the other way. We don't know. We don't know. And I think it's up to that board to make a recommendation. That's their charge. They have to make a recommendation to us. So my letter is more trying to just say, yes, let's have the recommendation, fully understanding that the deadline is there, but I don't want to have I wouldn't be willing to support a letter that points us in one direction or another for one option or another at this point without the additional information that the board asked for.
Okay, I understand.
Owen?
I agree with you, Ken, about the information gathering. I think one of the useful things that we would get from this is when the board makes a decision, it gets trickled down. When that decision gets rejected, they try to do reverse engineering and trickle it back up. And one of the problems that trickle the knowledge back up
Yeah.
from the citizenry, even on the select board level. So when we go into this meeting, if it's Bill and I attempting to put them at ease that our Rockport board is unanimous on something, one way or the other, or not, if we don't have something like this, they have to take our word on it, have questions lingering in the back of their brain about, is the Rockport Select Board actually unanimous on moving in a certain direction? So if we were unanimous on moving in a certain direction, comma, with the understanding that if new information comes to light that significantly alters the conversation, et cetera, we could, Bill and I could possibly make a decision to say we're uncomfortable now and we want to null our letter. But us going to that meeting with a letter saying that the board is unanimous with a certain decision just takes that bit of the equation out for the other people in towns that don't sit and watch our meetings.
But how can you in that meeting then null the letter if we voted unanimously for it and you're only two members of the board? See, it doesn't, that's a bit of a
good
problem
point.
for me.
Well, you do, in your last paragraph, Ken, we asked you to present a new recommendation quickly and recommend that all 4 towns in Midco Solid Waste hold special town meetings before August 31st.
Right, I think
Yep.
that urgency is there. I mean, I wanna continue to consider the options. And so having the town meetings prior to that deadline date makes all the sense in the world to me, but I'm not ready myself yet to point so strongly to the fiber right without the new information that we assume is gonna be coming at that meeting.
How is it that any election, anyone who votes is in a position to gather as much information or misinformation as they want, all the way up to I'm looking globally, nationally or not, up to the point that they throw the proverbial lever, which is no longer around. So there is no rush to recommend that all 4 towns hold a meeting to say yay for Eco Maine. There's no rush to that at
No,
all.
there is no rush at all.
So here's my question. To me, the letter does 2 things. One, I think, to Brendan's question is, yes, it's very important that we create a public document that then forces them to at least read it at the meeting, and say, well, here is a body.
To me, this is tantamount to saying, would you please do your job?
Yeah.
And quickly.
So is this.
Yeah.
Would you please do your
Yeah,
job?
you're right.
I don't know why we're sending either.
Well, I see a difference in them because I see a recommendation in a letter before all the information is in.
If we hadn't had this, would you have felt the need to write this?
I wouldn't have necessarily, no. I mean, I think the board knows the urgency. I'm not opposed to sending a letter and letting them know that, yes, we want to have a new recommendation so we can bring it back to our citizens. I'm not opposed to that at all.
I'll be very blunt. My fear, which caused me to write the version that I did, is that there may be some members who are just wanting to play the clock out.
They'll study it to death.
Which
And I
is
And,
understand
we can
that.
do that.
actively avoiding doing
I
their
understand- I
job.
understand that
So
Do
situation.
you think writing this letter is going to change that, though?
Well, I think just to re-up the urgency, I think there's some value in that. And that's what I'm perfectly willing to do that. I'm perfectly willing.
You could come to the
I
meeting
don't
and
object
speak.
I don't object to writing the letter. I just don't. I don't object to submitting the letter.
And the real reason
just
that
don't think it's gonna
I did it was that Lincolnville had already written a letter suggesting that they effectively do nothing.
And one quick, does July end on the 30th?
31st.
31st.
31 days, half.
And I only bring it up because I
August.
thought that our deadline was the 30th of August, not the 31st. I thought. That's what I had it in my head.
I know,
I could
when we
totally
were
be
up
wrong.
there, they talked intermittently of
They wanted
the
to
end of
know.
August and August
And August
30th.
Not knowing which one was the actual end of
So,
August, and I thought I had heard
You know,
at the end.
there's
of
one day
30th.
difference,
Okay.
and
We're gonna have
I,
our town meetings
yeah.
at least a couple of days before that, I would
Yeah.
think.
Okay.
you know,
Would you guys both agree that what you want to say is we urge you to process the new information that you collected and communicate with the towns with enough time
Right.
to, what's the next clause? With enough time to act on a,
To hold decisive
To
town
keep the
meetings.
option of the fiberite open. I mean, you know, that's.
Which would
that's
entail-
what I've mentioned the fiberite deadline in my version, and I said, you know, if, by doing nothing, we take that option off the table, and that's making a decision by not making a decision, and that's one of the reasons why I think that, you know, writing a letter does have some value. Is that, you know, we don't wanna let them say, we haven't made up our mind, we're not there yet, let's put it off till the next meeting.
I have a question, Ken. If we were to send something more with Bill's language that kind of says fiberite, let's make a vote on fiberite, knowing full well that you would have a time slot at the open town meeting to state a disagreement with some of the facts that we've gathered between a submission of this letter, because now that Bill brings it up, I do think that there would be a lot of worth in just having a vote on fiberite specifically. And if it gets rejected, then we know what we've got to do at that point. It's go with EcoMaine and figure out the best deal that we can get. But when we go to that special town meeting and have our discussion and debate pre-vote, we can air any sort of additional information that we've gathered between our last Midco Solid Waste meeting and the special town meeting. Would that ability to say to the crowd and the people that are going to be voting in your town, hey, just so you know, this happened in the last week, this happened 2 weeks ago.
Well, I guess my answer to that would be, I mean, it's the Midco Solid Waste Board that has the expertise and the history to make a recommendation. I want them to make a recommendation. If we're gonna put a fiberite question on the ballot, no matter what the Midco Solid Waste thing, and we can set the town meeting warrant tonight. We don't have to wait for what they do. I think the point is,
Well, my question is, what happens if Midco Solid Waste comes out with the same exact recommendation, which is.
then we'll have, as a board, we'll have a decision to make at that point.
yeah, but at least at least at that point,
At that point,
They've
we-
gotten
and
the
that may,
information,
that may
they've-
be for whatever reason, that may be because some of the people who want EcoMaine are steadfast and not gonna change that, maybe because the new information that comes from fiberite is unsettling to some people. There's any number of reasons that may be the case, we don't know that yet, that's why I'm perfectly comfortable sending a letter saying, let's get going and get a new recommendation out, but I mean, that board has to give us a recommendation. If we're just gonna put a fiberite question on the ballot, we can decide to do that, we can just ignore that board, and I don't think that's the right procedure.
Well, my only concern with that is then Bill and I would have to go sit at a board meeting where we've already made a decision as to what our town's gonna do, so what the hell are we there for then?
Well, you're there to represent our town.
That's
and-
true.
And to hear the new information. I mean, I assume that Fiberite is gonna send new people, but maybe the other ones will too. I don't know. I have no idea whether they're gonna send new information in or not, but.
I know there will be representation from
I'm sure there will,
MRC
yeah.
and Fiber right there. Yeah, the real question that we have to deal with is, we have a limited period of time, actually just over a month, to make a decision if we want to send it to MRC. After that, it's off the table.
I understand.
well, if the recommendation doesn't come, we can still,
Then we'll be,
Schedule a
in
meeting.
I mean, we'll be in a better position as this board to make a decision on what we wanna put on the ballot after the meeting on Wednesday.
So
We can
again,
make
we-
our own decision to send it somewhere.
right.
You know, because each of the 4 towns have entered into individual agreements right now with MRC up until March 31st,
But we have a
2018.
responsibility to allow them to do their jobs.
That's right,
Yeah,
that's right, absolutely.
and, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, if we don't make a firm statement, there are a number of them on there that are willing to just say, oh, we need to study this more. You know, I can't make a decision till at least December, which means it's a no decision.
Well, as I say, I think my version pushes the prompt decision. and I'm all for that.
And, you know, it is only a matter of verbiage here, I think. You know, we've expressed, at least to Owen and myself, that there is a belief in the need of urgency to settle the MRC fiberite issue once and for all. Because if there is no decision, there is no recommendation, it's done.
Well, you know, there's, the other question is, what happens if the MRC, the board that you know, you sit on, that we're a member of this organization, that dissolving it will come with costs and difficulties. If that.
MRC or Midco
Midco
Solid
Solid
Waste?
Waste.
Okay, sorry, yeah, Midco Solid, thank you. For Midco Solid Waste, is what happens if the recommendation is the same? They do it in time, they do it, they hold another special meeting a week after this
Look,
one.
they asked for more information.
Right.
They've collected the information. We
Right.
gotta let them
Oh,
either
yeah.
make or not make a
Right.
recommendation. If they don't make, I mean, there's nothing, we can't force them to make the recommendation, but we need to give them time to do it. And
Right, no, I'm saying that there's we
even
need
if
to
the
be
recommendation is the same as it was before and it doesn't give us any help,
Right.
they will have at least
They have,
done it.
and they will do that, I think, you know.
Yep, but this is intended to express this select board's request to at least seriously move forward and have all of our citizens vote on MRC fiberite. To have that vote, because we've already had a vote on Eco Maine, and it was turned down by 3 of the 4 towns. A couple of them rather significantly. You know, we can have a discussion about how the Camden vote went and what it meant, but that's a completely different subject, and that's for them to
I
decide.
mean Lincolnville.
No,
Oh.
Camden.
Camden's vote was the same as our vote.
Well, there
One
was
would
this
think
thing,
that,
somebody
wouldn't they?
said, call the question. The moderator had a second.
Somebody said that at ours too.
No, but
No, but
we
for a
did
different
it
thing.
where we went out and we counted the number of people who wanted to call the question. You needed a 2/3 vote. In Camden, when they said call the question, the moderator then called for the vote on the original motion, not on whether to shut off debate or not. So John French is absolutely right. I don't know what they really meant, because some of the people that were voting no thought they were voting no on not cutting off debate.
Plot thickens.
You know, and I'm surprised at that
Guys,
because
we're not gonna solve this here tonight.
you know,
No, no.
we're not going to solve that.
Find the
You know,
wording
That's
that
why
you
I'm
guys
saying I'm
can
not
agree
sure
on.
what Camden's vote really meant.
Right.
But I thought ours was pretty clear, and I know that Hope's vote was pretty clear.
Gets easier with time. You just roll
So-
with it. The insanity.
You know, if you don't
So
want, if we
does
don't
this,
want-
does this board want to send one of these letters?
I want to send Ken's.
I will agree with that. Make a motion.
I move to
I
let
moved the- you- you do the
Mr. Parker
thing.
finish the sentence.
You move to let Mr. Parker send it?
Yes.
Sorry, I missed that point.
No, go ahead.
I move that we endorse and send this letter along to the Midco Solid Waste Corporation Board of Directors before their July 27th meeting.
And parenthetically, this letter being Ken's
This
version.
letter being Ken's draft.
This letter being Ken's draft.
Second.
It's seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Is any, no, everybody put their hands up, so. Ken, would you email that to me? So I can get it on and I'll.
And if there's any typos, feel free to.
My only thing would be the only date that we do have to check
Yeah,
is
whatever
this
that
final
date,
one,
check
the special
the
town
dates.
meeting before the 31st. Because if it was the 30th and they're like, we'll shoot for the 31st. Just saying, I couldn't remember if it was 30th or 31st.
Yeah, the August 31st appears twice in
It's
here.
not going to be
Yeah,
that big of a
and-
deal.
And I'd reiterate, because sometimes they were saying end of August.
Yeah.
Well, I'll email it to
And-
you and to
Okay.
Rick, and then he can put it on stationery. And,
Okay.
Not to flog a dead horse, but doesn't there have to be reaction time for the Midco Solid Waste Board? Because the towns themselves, even if all 4 towns voted and said, yes, we want fiber right, that the contract and the final tip of the hat is something that the board of directors of Midco Solid Waste needs to do, negative.
Negative, because the way the original contracts are and the way Midco Solid Waste is set up, the contracts have to be signed by the towns. It's, Rockport is a member of MRC.
Yes.
Municipal Review Committee.
Yes.
Camden is a member, not Midco Solid Waste. Midco Solid Waste is only the conglomeration of the 4 towns to collect the garbage and send it on.
Okay.
But it's the cumulative effort of the 4 towns that have signed on with them. And, you know, that's the way Midco Solid Waste is set up.
So the board of Midco Solid Waste is very powerful and yet not powerful at all.
It's more than a 3-year contract. There's certain
Right,
things
right.
that.
No,
And
no,
it
I
says
get the
there, yeah.
approval part of it.
Right.
But there has to be a body that sits down to whose signatures are affixed to the final document.
Oh, I see what you
And,
mean.
and so,
Trying to figure that out. in my head.
yeah, no, I screwed up the syntax of that
If we
sentence.
sign on as a town,
Yes,
that carries it through. And what we need, you know, if the vote is positive at whatever town meeting we have in Camden, et cetera,
right. Certainly,
is
the
what they're
sentiment is
hearing.
there. Certainly the sentiment is there,
Yeah.
but you're not, my rudimentary understanding of the structure is that you will not, if that's enough for MRC to say, we're not gonna cut you loose, you're still our buddies, you're still in with the investment and all that stuff. If 4 towns approving the vote is enough, that's great. But up to now, there is that other layer of the board of directors of Midco Solid Waste, and why are they not on the back end of that, the ones that then say, yeah, you're right, and sign?
How does this sound? I make a commitment to you to bring this up at the July 27th meeting.
Right, and I'll be there
And
too.
if we have to do something
Sure.
funky to make that timeline fit,
That's the only thing, is we don't want to have, we don't
Exactly.
want to squeeze the timeline so much so that everything is going one way.
and when it all looked great, but we're 2 days late.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would ask the 2 of you who were at the MRC meeting, I mean, if we've had the votes and so, if all that's left is dotting i's and crossing t's, are they gonna be difficult about it?
No.
Okay,
No.
that's all.
No,
I need to
but
hear.
I'll
That's-
say,
yeah, that's
they
essentially
gave the only other people there a 1-month extension.
Yeah.
We've got the latest extension of basically anyone in the state.
But
we
they
have a-
also had issues, like they had a 3-3 vote on a 7-member board because the 7th member was out of town and therefore had to be back, and they were sure that the member would vote in favor of that. The other one was, they were 3-3 on a 6-member board, and they had to make their decision. They were given a 1 month because they meet regularly. They didn't need to go back to town meeting.
Right.
They had the authority to
Right, in that
approve.
case.
Well, we have a more complex
Yeah,
structure
we have a
here.
more complex structure because the 4 towns have to agree,
Right.
you know, individually, because that's the way Midco Solid Waste was set up with the interlocal agreement. Any contract over 3 years has to be approved by the municipal authority of the town, which is the town voters.
Right.
So, okay.
Perfunctory.
We've got that, you'll send that, and we'll take care of it. Okay, the next item, no public hearing, new business, no acknowledgement of gifts to the town. We have the resignation of Eliza Hazelton from the Pathways Committee, and she indicates in it that she is very involved in other activities with the town or on town business, so she has to step back from the Pathways Committee.
I move to approve the resignation of Eliza Hazelton from the Camden and Rockport Pathways Committee and to send our letter of thank you to her for her service.
Second.
It's moved and second. Discussion?
Nope.
She's been real good on
Yeah.
the Pathways Committee. She's a lot of energy on a a lot of things. In fact, I saw her passed her by at the town office this morning, and she reminded me that I have to buy firefighter ball tickets, so she's working on the 125th too.
You don't have those yet?
I'll get there.
It's this
I
Friday.
don't think they're gonna run out.
Okay. Further discussion? Then all in favor of accepting the resignation? That is done. Okay.
And hopefully next month I'll have a new one for you to approve to take her space, hopefully.
Good, good. But we're always looking for members to volunteer on our committees. The next item is, we've already had the application. So, discuss the vote to direct the cemetery committee to review and update the fees related to burials in the Rockport Town cemeteries.
I'm just gonna make the motion. We move to direct the cemetery committee to review and update the fees related to burials in the Rockport Town cemeteries.
Second.
We've discussed this
Yep.
ad nauseum, and I think it's just the board prerogative of this board to make it formal so that the work gets done.
That was the point.
Only one quick question. Are they going to, and I don't want to downplay their professionals, I understand, are they going to do a nominal number out of a hat, or are they going to look at surrounding cemeteries?
Well, the way this all came up was when the gentleman
No,
came
we're
and
a
talked to
lot
us for
low.
the columbarium, he was actually on the cemetery committee in his town, and I can't remember which town it was, another town in Maine.
So we were
It was
wicked
over
low.
in Androscoggin.
And he looked at our schedule and commented that our fees were not only a little low, but extremely low. And so, yes, the answer to the question is yes, there's gonna be some comparison of surrounding towns and what they charge, so that we can get in line with that.
Further discussion? All in favor? We will direct. Okay, the next item, now we get into the review of the reserve account policy. Actually, we have before us the account policy, and in addition, Megan has prepared a letter to us regarding what our current policy amounts are. She also has some recommendation for increasing some or taking verbiage and reworking it, or making limits where there are no limits, or just indicating that there are no limits, because it's sort of vague now. Okay, go ahead.
What is the usefulness of having a limit? Just forcing them to utilize it, or why do we set limits on reserve accounts?
So
If
we
someone
don't
can-
build up too much in some of them. Like, the first one that's gonna come up is the police cruiser reserve fund. The idea is to have enough money in there that if, for some reason, the cruiser is demolished in an accident or something like that, we have the money available where we don't have to go to a special town meeting to authorize the purchase of that, but we can utilize that money to replace the cruiser.
That's probably not the best example, because I think it's more about planning, because our
Yeah.
insurance will pay for a wrecked cruiser to some extent, less the deductible, but it's more a planning tool so that we don't have, all of a sudden we have to buy a fire truck, is the best example,
And they're
for
coming
half
up
a
further
million
down.
dollars or whatever. And we have to go to the voters and ask for that. So it's a planned savings plan is the way I see it.
Oh, I get that.
And but I think the idea for the limit is, I mean, let's say that we've got $500,000 and we're coming up to buy a fire truck, and somebody says, well, I don't wanna buy a fire truck, the town doesn't vote to buy the fire truck, we still have the money in a reserve account, and then the budget comes along and says, let's put some more money in. Well, wait a minute, that's taxpayers' money. We don't wanna have that money sitting there, and with no perhaps plan to use it. So that's the way I see it, having a limit on an account useful. Is that we don't want to be parking a lot of the taxpayers' money someplace and just letting it sit there without a planned use.
So we say limit, but it's really a target to know when that's full. And then, so one of the questions becomes, because there's several spaces where the recommendation is either up the number or just
No
have it
limit at
with
all.
no limit at all. And the boat, I think, is a good, the harbor master's boat and the engine reserve are good for that, because you could have a harbor master's boat that ran from, X to 100X in terms of cost. So it's, I think it's an educated guess on we're gonna feed this fund, this reserve fund for 10 years. We think that $100,000 will do it in the end, so that in the 11th year, we'll use the 100 plus, a small amount of money from the active budget, combine those two numbers and replace, fund whatever it is the reserve fund is for.
So what's the limit for the fire apparatus reserve? Because that's a huge number.
$1 trillion.
400.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, some
there is
accounts have limits on them and some don't, and I think it was a function of previous administrations and previous boards wanting to exercise control in certain areas. You can see the,
Oh, with
Well,
that as a
in the case
mindset,
of
I can
the
see that.
fire
with a mindset,
apparatus
right.
reserve, it was intended for the replacement fire engine. And we have sort of changed our direction on
That's
this
fine.
as to how we are funding it. But, you know, we've got a bond, or no, I'm sorry, a lease purchase agreement, I think it is, where some of the money each year is coming from this, as well as we're putting more money back in so that we're getting ready for the next truck, which may be coming up in another 5 or 10 years. This truck, we have been putting aside for something like 20 years to make that money available with the idea, oh, we're only gonna need one truck. And here's the money, it's bought. Well, cost of the truck kept going up and the amount in the fund really never quite increased at the same rate. So we went to the lease purchase idea and then looked looked forward and say, we're gonna need to replace another one in a number of years. So let's keep retaining this fund just in case, to even out the cost to the town. Which is what a lot of the reserves are, to even it out, set it aside so you don't have that huge bump one year.
John Zeman,
Megan, it seems to me that
John Zeman, I think, introduced that.
defining these limits in this way with dollar values assigned to them means that this document
Fire truck.
will inherently become out of date in a relatively short period of time.
Yes.
Can we define these limits as a percentage of the budget for the line items and therefore keep the limits, broadly speaking, accurate and useful moving into the future?
I'm not clear what you mean by
I
as
hear
a
what he's
percentage
saying.
of the
Every
budget.
year, we go through the budget
Yeah.
and we set the dollar value for the entire budget for each one of these sections. If the limit is set as a percentage of the budget total, this document is relevant forever.
I think the tough part about that is the budget itself may fluctuate from year to year. And so then the percentage.
But
yeah.
to his point, if we're in austere times, you don't want to pack away too much money in the.
I only
Well, true.
found one thing to poke a hole in it. So the police and the fire budgets are relatively-ish similar. However, buying a police cruiser is much cheaper than buying a fire truck.
Okay, but
so
that
having
stuff's-
that percentage
But the-
ratio.
But purchasing something like that is gonna come into the capital improvement plan, right?
Yes, and
These are
these reserve,
unanticipated.
Yeah.
these reserve accounts will fund that capital
Right.
item. Is
That's-
the essential intention of the reserve account.
with the capital
I see.
improvement plan, you'll be saying, where's
This
that money
is
gonna
where the
come?
money
coming
goes
from
from the
there.
capital.
Right.
Where's it gonna come from to pay for that? And
But I
as-
like your
I'm
idea.
okay, I was just looking for a way to not have to
Can
do
we
this
tie
over
it
and
to an
over.
index? Can you tie it to some CPI, some sort of?
And I think quite honestly, yes, the answer is yes, you could, but I think it's less confusing. I know what you're saying, Brendan, that you're gonna have to go in there because of what happens if we have rampant inflation over the next 10 years.
I was just
Like
trying
the
to think
dollar-
about writing a
the dollar
spreadsheet
value
where
becomes
this was
obsolete, but
automatic.
I think the dollar value is probably the easiest way for most people to understand it.
And the reality is that when the money builds up, it's not like we're not gonna wanna spend it, because if we have a need, we have to fill that need. For the new harbor master boat or whatever it was, or the fire apparatus was one that Ginny came up with, that creative way of saying, we're still another 10 years away from being able to buy the fire truck, but if we contribute to the reserve at this amount over this many years, we can buy the fire truck now and slowly deplete that reserve and make all the payments. We can do that. But most of this stuff is all stuff that will be directly related to the capital improvement plan. And the fear that we'll have a bunch of money just sitting there without an expenditure, that's not the way the town works. We're not in the savings account business. You have to have a certain amount of money so that you have money available to
I
purchase
understand, but we
things.
should either have like realistic limits or no limits.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
understand
that's
the
why we
limit.
adjust the limits. When they become unrealistic, we move them to be a realistic. Owen wants to speak.
Yeah, but I agree with him. It's kind of like the minimum wage. You know, why address it every 5 years when you can? So my question to you, ma'am, is, does all this stuff fit nicely in an Excel spreadsheet? And is it as simple as adding an extra bit of code when you do that top bit to have everything bump up every year at a 3% or whatever percentage? Or does it become more complicated?
One thing we could do is once the capital improvement plan has been accepted, we can do a weighted percentage for these reserve items versus what the capital improvement plan is. So that's one way we could look at it. Instead of looking at it
I mean,
at
all
a
of these-
budget value, we could look at it at a capital improvement plan value.
All of these reserves taken together add up to the entire budget of the capital improvement plan?
Would
Is that
be-
a true statement?
Would be the expected total,
Yeah.
because these reserve accounts aren't gonna equal to
Well,
the capital improvement.
Except for the fact that some of them have different timelines. Like a fire
Right,
truck.
right,
you're
they're
gonna-
not all within one calendar.
You know,
year.
And
mature.
if we did a great capital improvement plan for Marge Jones, what we would find is to get it up to maintaining properly, we would exhaust and then some our reserve account. So it does get funky.
So the only thing that we do by introducing a formulaic limitation or a formulaic support of is that we very much utilize during budget season the idea of saying we're going to push and pull some of these reserve funds because the reserve funds are big ticket items. And we find that, you know, okay, we really ought to be putting in $75,000 into the fire truck, but for this year, we're gonna go down to 25, and next year, we're gonna step it up to 125 because, you know, we sort of make ourselves that promise. So I'm a little concerned that an arbitrary indexing will not allow us to do some of the smoothing out. I mean, there was some very interesting smoothing out.
Happy to rescind that.
Yeah.
I was looking for a way.
From a practical level, it's kind of like also the hit that the Public Works Department take, because that's the big guy. And we could say, oh, well, let's kill the Public Works guys for 100,000 this year because this, and this came up. And then next year, we promise to do 135 back or something like that.
Just so you know, my proposal was not on how much we put in budget every year. It was only the limit would continue to increase. So we, every year, would still be able to make that decision. Only this, my recommendation would now be $30,000. Then next year, that would be $30,000 plus 3%. And then it would be $33,000 plus 3%. And then it would
We
be,
could vote to eliminate the limits entirely if we wanted to. Like
How
I
many
said-
of them have limits?
Well, the only reason is
that's the first
if
question.
a fund didn't get spent and then you're parking a lot of the taxpayers' money someplace with no plan to spend.
Can't we
That's-
just yell at Rick when that happens?
Yeah, right.
I mean,
It's like, yeah.
you
that-
could.
Well, that's
you
why we
actually
hold this
could, yeah.
exercise every year, so we can yell at Rick.
But
Or
wait,
Megan.
how many of these have limits on them, Megan? You've
I mean, I'm looking at most of them, they do.
Yeah.
I think the intention behind the limits was to make sure that the reserve account didn't exceed the expected replacement value. Is that, like Bill said, we don't end up with $100,000 in a police cruiser reserve, but in reality, that's not gonna happen.
No, it's-
You're
Because
gonna
we're
keep
on a
spending.
replacement schedule, and this
Too many
money is
eyeballs.
gonna get spent either purchasing outright or paying lease payments.
And when it comes up during the budget season, and we say, well, what we intend to do is have 30,000 in the police cruiser reserve, we've only got 2,500. You know, our intent is to have that much, we should look at it, but if we're up at 27.5,
Right.
well, we don't need to put in 5,000, and maybe, you know, based on current estimates, we don't need to put in anything. It's just sort of
So that idea,
an idea.
Point-
you're
points-
putting
yeah.
to our
Of the
mind.
guideline.
yeah, that
Yeah.
idea points to the limit
Yeah.
as a full guideline,
Yeah.
as a, I am now
You know,
full.
If you notice, number, where was it?
But I
Okay,
mean,
I've lost
Megan
it.
can just have an if-then clause in her spreadsheet that turns the cell a different color and
Say, don't fund it
say,
anymore.
look, just so you know that you're,
Well, the annual funding of these accounts is just as very fluid. you know, every year we look at that and we decide, well, this year we have greater needs, we wanna put a little more money in and maybe.
Yeah, we don't even have anything in the locomotive.
Yeah, that was the one I was looking for, was the Kramer Locomotive Reserve. We've got nothing in there. Do we even need to have that? Or is it supposed to trigger us that, we got
It serves us as a
historical
reminder,
things,
right.
and maybe we need to consider how we're gonna support our historical artifacts in town.
Historical Artifacts Reserve
I
account.
mean, I guess I would suggest revisiting this when we get to the capital improvement plan. I don't necessarily think we have to take any action this evening. And then.
Is
I
there
think-
anything that stands out? Do we have to take any action? Is there anything that we're in
Recommendation?
danger of doing anything?
There's one account that's currently over its limit.
Which is.
Oh, yeah,
And that's the Marine Park Float Reserve. It's $1,264.96 over
I've got a
it.
foot
Yeah,
bridge
that's
you can
under.
replace.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's when we've overdrawn.
Oh, it's
But we
under,
did
it's
it
not
deliberately, and we took a vote to do it, to be able to
Which one
provide
is this,
something.
the Marine Park?
Number 10.
Number 10.
Marine
Oh,
Park
I'm
Float
sorry,
Reserve.
there is
Oh,
one that's
12,
over.
recreation. Account should not exceed 56,
Yes,
and we're
thank
already
you.
past.
Oh, yeah.
It's at 58,000, so it's 2,000.
Well, that's the one you want to
something
take the
dollars
money
over.
from anyway.
Isn't that money about to leave to go?
But we haven't
Somebody
taken it
already
yet.
voted for it, so.
But on the other hand, if that fund is there for tennis courts, and if the tennis courts are gonna cost $100,000,
Right.
don't stop it at 50.
Right.
Because then it's just gonna be the opposite, it's not likely that we're gonna have, $300,000 in a fund and all of a sudden we don't spend it, because we've been saving for 20 years to get there. It's more likely that you have 50,000 in a fund that really cost something for cost 100, and you say, we can't bite that off this year, and now you're 5 years down the road, doing more stuff to it. And at that point, you say, tennis courts, what tennis courts, because they all got, weeds on it. So I think that the realistic limits, the phraseology could be changed to full or something, the full amount is.
Targeted full amount.
Yeah, something like that. But I think that it's helpful. And I think also, and the capital expense committee capital plan committee will look at this, a reevaluation of some of these things to bring them up to reality. To bring the tennis court up to reality, to bring the harbor master's boat to reality, that sort of thing, would be important.
I defer to the people who've been through the budget.
Yeah. One thing I would point out, though, is one of the items, number 13, Employee Accrued Benefits Reserve, is something that is extremely critical to our budgeting factor, because as employees accrue in the number of years of service, they have with them certain benefits.
We
that
have
they
to be able
can
to
take
cover them.
with them when they retire, and we need to set that aside, because we've had a couple of big years where we've drawn down that fund because of either early retirements or whatever, and they can take that. And those can be huge impacts to our budget.
Yeah.
On that note, that
Mark,
employee accrued benefits is down to like $13,000
because of Mark.
because of retirement benefits.
Oh, yes.
Because of a certain
So
recently retired.
when we go through the process, once I've closed out the year for last fiscal year, if we have any personnel benefits left, I'm gonna request that they all be deposited into that.
Was one of the challenges, particularly with that one, is that we'll eventually start getting dinged in our audit if the audit starts to look at what are our unfunded liabilities as far as retirements coming up.
Well,
They
we
may
do
get
have a
to
couple of long-time employees.
Oh, yeah.
We have several
several,
with
and they're all gonna go at the same time.
enormous amounts of accrued vacation, sick, and comp time.
Can you just generally speaking, what does enormous look like?
They would range anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 probably
Each or total?
each.
There you go.
So you got a couple $100,000 of unfunded liability potentially there.
Assuming they don't take any time off between now and retirement.
So it would be ill-advised to set a limit on that.
Yeah,
Well,
that one
Well, the
doesn't
only,
have
the
a.
limit
And that
on
was
that
only
one has
pointed.
as the aggregate liability, and we're nowhere near that, obviously.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't fund that with the full aggregate liability anyway, that would be foolish use of the taxpayers' money, because everybody's not gonna retire on the same day.
But you want to have enough
Knock on wood.
in case they.
We'll see, you know, with the Public Works employees, there's a batch of them that are gonna be all in a 3-year period, a 3 or 4 year period.
And they are the ones that have the most accumulated time.
Yep. Yeah, you know, this is the benefit of having good employees who are there. And it's also, whoa, we've got a lot of good employees.
Should we be funding that on a more ongoing basis? In other words, at the end of a
like
fiscal year, you know, as employee A has so much accrued time, should we be budgeting to deposit that money into that reserve account at that point?
We had originally budgeted 25,000, I want to say, to go into that this fiscal year
a line
as a budget item, but that's one of the items that got cut, and it's 15,000 now, and that's why I'm saying any wage and benefit money that we have left in this past fiscal year's budget, I'm gonna request be deposited into this, because if we have one more employee retire or get done, my estimate is that we won't have enough in that line to pay them.
So it sounds like, you know, the better course of action is to, as we work through the CIP plan, and you'll have a better sense of what these costs are actually gonna be, so that if there's no, you know, reason to approve or change anything, to just
So
let it
we're
ride.
agreeing to revise these as part of the,
Yeah, as
Yeah,
we,
when we have more information.
when you have more information. So,
Owen?
On a different note, number 15, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure reserve, I believe that that's been replaced by pathways reserve, because the technical name of the pathways committee has bicycle in it as well. So I'm only throwing it out there. I don't believe you would do any harm with deleting that reserve budget,
Well,
because it
Which
is now.
would explain why I couldn't find an account number or balance.
Well, it's
for
an
it.
interesting question, because when we established the Pathways Reserve last year, I was under the there was money left over from the
Right.
Union Street Pathway, and
About
I
$5,000.
was under the impression that that was not in a reserve account, but was sitting in a general ledger account someplace, which is why we established the Pathways Reserve in the first place. I thought, I'm a little surprised to see that.
But the other one has had no money in it. We didn't even have a general ledger account for it. But it was in, remember,
the
it could be in
policy,
this document, the policy, but not have an equivalent fund somewhere that we have been funding.
Such as that locomotive
Yeah.
reserve.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful, I think, to go through it for that and see, you know, are there any of these we can eliminate? Like, I think that's a good example right there,
Well,
that
number
bicycle.
6.
We only need one of those accounts.
Right.
And then the locomotive one, I mean, do we have any anticipation that we're gonna spend any money on that locomotive in the near term?
We
And how much do we have to save to do
We
it?
spent some money, I wanna say 5 or 6 years ago, to do some refurbishing, just so it would be able to stay there in the park. And kids climb all over it, you know, so it had to have a certain structural matter. I have no idea what that cost was.
And did it come from the reserve account, or was it a general budget item? Before my
I
time.
have no
so I
idea.
don't know.
I don't have any recollection of where it
Well,
came
that would
from.
be another one to look
You know,
for.
I
Well, it's
just
funny,
remember
all
that
the
everybody taking it.
lime kilns fall under the public works stuff, didn't it? Oh, no, I'm sorry, that was under recreation. All the lime kiln restoration numbers were all under the rec budget, which falls under
recreation or parks?
recreation.
Should be parks.
Yeah, I'd say parks, but.
For what?
It's not something we need to worry about tonight.
Lime kiln
It's just,
Parks
restoration.
and Rec.
Parks and Rec,
I'm
sorry.
trying to get a sense of where we think we should be going on some of these. Megan has made some recommendations as to upping an amount or just stating whether there is a limit or not a limit. You know, in the case of we just approved the police department career development reserve and funded it, but we never said if there was gonna be a limit or if it had no limit. And that's one where we really need to make a statement, because this is to train incoming officers. And if we have a limit, that could impact ability to put money in as it comes from those organizations that steal our officers, our well-trained officers.
And the money in this account too is from the federal forfeiture, so if we have,
You've got a
drug
separate
busts
line on
in it.
that. Number 3 is federal forfeiture.
It was, but I'm sorry,
We had money from 2 sources.
right. It was deferred revenue that had come in from a previous officer too.
Yeah. Jeff, you?
I was just wondering if we're done with that particular one, we might want to take a look at number 6, which is video equipment reserve, which is separate from Opera House building reserve, which is 9. It has a paltry amount of $381 in it and 3 cents. But if we were to retitle that Opera House Equipment Fund, it could then also apply, and we could be putting aside money for theatrical lighting and the things that we need upstairs, having just spent a crop of money. And we found that, one, that was such a minor account, at budget time, nobody put any money into it anyway, and the items that we would be getting were all like $1,000 each, so that, we didn't really use that very much, but if we were to take that line in that account, rename it, and call it just Opera House Equipment, as opposed to the building reserve, which is a very different usage, we could start making progress towards things that we would really should be doing upstairs, with both lighting equipment, fireproofing the curtains and stuff like
So
that.
what you're suggesting is combining 6 and 9.
No,
and
because
retitling-
they're very different.
Renaming
Oh,
6.
just
Yeah,
renaming 6.
Renaming 6 and bumping its
Oh.
limit up,
Right.
yeah.
Okay,
I
well,
had a question on that vein.
yeah,
When you go to do the television improvements to get us back on channel 22,
Oh, for
And
your
you-
wife, you mean?
right? Love you. And you need a bit of equipment for that. Where do you get money from for that? Did that come from this line or a different?
We are just at the end of the last fiscal year, we just spent the last 7 cents on the money that came from the 2-year bond. Well, we spent over 2 years, from bond money. So the big improvement here was that, and then as we got towards the end of it, little things, I don't expect. Yeah, we have in the last couple of dollars that we just spent in order to finish out the year, the fiscal year, we have the equipment that was needed to connect to the laser that goes to channel 23.
And my question was only about if you do rename it, that limits what you can spend on to this building only, and not knowing whether or not that's a good idea or not, I'm asking the question of, are there other places outside of this building in which this video equipment reserve could be allocated, and if you renamed it, you could no longer?
No, by renaming, we're expanding it, but we're expanding it upstairs within this building.
Well, I think what the question is, we have other video cameras around town, like.
Yeah, but they're police cameras and they come in on
Yeah.
separate budgets,
and
so.
there's
we don't-
nothing that
we
you
never wanna have
foresee as
video
an
at the
issue.
Richardson Room.
Well, that's a good question, and I think that, exactly, do we want video equipment at the Richardson Room? There is, you'll notice, a unkempt pile of stuff out in the hallway, which, because we live in a wonderful town of honest people, no one's done anything with. That is this old standard def stuff, and I designed the way that the equipment is allocated in the different carts to, if we had a really important meeting at the Richardson Room, we could actually install the standard def stuff, take a few of the things from here out, and we could have the meeting there. So
okay.
there are no, I understand what you're saying, I appreciate your expansive thinking. At such a time when that comes up, then you'd rename that again. Which is not, it's not unheard of, it's been done, but more to the point, I would want to start to give some emphasis to the stuff that wants to happen upstairs on behalf of the town.
What I'd like to suggest at this point is that we effectively table our discussion until August 22nd, I think it is. Not our August 8th meeting, but the one in the later part of August. And maybe ask Rick to come up with specific recommendations and motions that we can do.
have all
And
of
the
those.
idea being, if you've got specific ideas or thoughts, feed them to Rick so that we can come back and actually make these, 'cause, Megan's already made a start on these, increase this, increase that. Well, do we need to set a limit or not? Those kinds of things. And we need to have that done. And if you feel strongly that we shouldn't be putting limits on, let us know that as well. It's, both, so that we have something, of meat that we can actually vote on come, the end of August. Owen?
My only question is about the capital improvements committee
Yeah?
and when they may meet, and is there any desire to have them meet, look over some of this stuff beforehand? I'm just throwing it out there.
You're looking at October?
Yeah.
And that was what my question was, when are they gonna meet?
Yeah.
Okay.
And having them review it at that point may be very valid, coming into then the budget cycle, so that we've got that start. But, we can put a stake in the ground to say, here's what we think. And where it's appropriate, the capital improvement committee can take a look at it. I'm not sure if they're gonna look at police cruisers or things like that, but they may look at the fire apparatus and stuff like that too. So,
Technically, they're supposed to look at anything that goes above a certain dollar amount.
2,000.
Anything and
Oh, yeah, no,
everything.
that's it, I'm looking at-
It's 5,000.
5,000.
And has a life expectancy of, how many?
It's either has a life expectancy of 10 years or more, or is $5,000 or greater.
okay. So, a police cruisers cost more than that, but it doesn't have a life expectancy, so it would fall in, so. But I would assume that those are, review items on their docket. Is everybody sort of in agreement here?
Sure.
I think so, yeah, we're
Okay.
not in a position to take any action.
Okay. I really got that. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Megan.
Now, let's move on. To direct the town manager to review the policy for renting Marine Park for weddings and other events during peak summer months. He has provided with us the rental checklist and fee schedule that currently exists. This issue has sort of been percolating over the last several years, where we've had some very large events down there that are very private events and have taken up the heart, most of the marine park for 3, 4, 5, 8 days. And have caused significant inconvenience to the citizens of the town to whom the park belongs. I look on here and I see under miscellaneous fees, permit for a structure, $50 for a tent. Tents rent for 1,000 or more. Utilities, $25 were available. Marine Park, non-resident, $550.
I think the discussion that we have to have really has to be, do we want to allow this at all? I mean, we can talk about the fees at a later time, but do we want the park to be taken over, so to speak, by somebody and made unavailable for the residents who, as you say, pay for it for a period of 5 days over a weekend, and then you add up the weekends and it ends up being available or unavailable more than it's available for the town residents. I think that's a fundamental discussion we have to have. Do we want to continue to allow that to occur?
Well, Rockport has become, what was the term? A destination?
Destination
For
wedding.
for some weddings that they like to come here. A group of people going down and standing there at the waterfront is not as intrusive as having a big tent set up. But should the town be receiving compensation approximately equal to the inconvenience and how do you set what that inconvenience fee is? Because weddings aren't the only things that go on down there. Sometimes they are charitable events. I know that the last time that Bettina from Lincolnville Cellar Door had an event down there, a number of people were very upset by it, but it effectively put a lot of money into local charities. Do we want to consider those in the same light as a wedding, which entrance to is extremely limited to only those who were invited?
Yeah, in my
There's
mind,
decisions that have to be made.
yeah, in my mind, there's different, there's a private event where nobody gets to use the park, and then there's an event that has a public purpose, and it may be a volunteer, nonprofit, or some other group that is doing something where the members of the public have an opportunity to participate in, and those are somewhat different than the private events where we're just renting a space and, there's no public benefit. There's very little public benefit to having a wedding.
Revenue.
Yeah, it's revenue.
Well, it's hardly enough to,
Well, that's
Cover
what
what?
got me picking this thing apart. Are we having a bigger, broader conversation, or are we
I
picking
don't-
apart this
I-
thing?
Yeah, I think it's just, do you want me to work on this and come back with something? And that's all I need is, do you want me
Well,
to
I've got a
work?
couple of notes, like, we've got a pricing scheme, but it doesn't tell me that I can see
This
whether
needs
it's.
a lot of work.
Yeah, like, is this, what if I do it for 3 days? Am I only gonna get charged as a non-resident $550, or is that per day?
It needs a lot of work.
yeah.
And then
That-
there's
that-
no.
That's for the event,
There's
so.
no guests number,
Right.
and
So one of my, if we were to continue to have weddings there, for instance, I would want to see a fee per day of any, change down there. So if they're building a tent, that's a day rate. At the tent's there for a weather day, that's a day rate. And I think we could easily, double that figure right there.
Yeah. Well,
At least, so,
Ken's point is,
do we have it?
do we
wrong?
need to make a broader decision that we want to even permit those kind of events where they have a physical structure set up for a period of time versus just coming down and standing there? Maybe you have 200 people standing there, but they're all just standing there
So,
looking out over the harbor.
That's a totally different question than what you had on the agenda, and
That's
the
right.
public may well want to comment.
Right.
I don't think it's appropriate for us to be having that conversation right now. We didn't tell people we were gonna have that conversation.
You're right. You're right.
I would just
Bringing it
recommend
forward.
that if you want me to do some work on this, I will gladly do some work on it and bring back something, and it'll generate a lot of other discussion and a lot of other comments and questions. But the key thing is, do you want me to work on this or not?
Yeah, I would say yes.
But to your point, Brendan, that when or if it comes back with recommendations, that will be properly announced so people can say,
Yep.
can come in and discuss that. It was put on here, review the rental scheme. And, if somebody had wanted to say, hey, I got a real problem with this on the park. I've heard from a couple people that they were sort of upset about one of the events that's been down there. But they didn't come to the point of saying, I don't want anything going on down there.
Well, and the agenda item does say review the policy for renting the park. It doesn't say review the fees.
Yeah.
It does say review the policy, so I think that leaves us open to discuss
yeah, I'm totally fine with this.
the whole
I looked
policy.
at it
But
too.
And I
Yeah.
think it
Fine
is
with this
worthwhile to have
Fair enough.
Rick put his head together with Abby and with,
Right.
I don't know whether Sue Dates is still involved with it.
It
or
will
not.
likely generate a workshop discussion for you guys with those concept ideas that you brought up, and, that you'll have to give some direction at some point but you need the information in order to give direction. back.
Well, on the other hand, if we were to plant some ideas now, that also might help you.
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, for instance, if we were to look at not having private events like weddings, I think that if that was in the consideration, we say, hey, we verbalize that now and say, hey, that's sort of this limit of what we're
Sure,
talking
that
about.
would make my work easier.
But with that in mind, I would say that should not cut out all private events, because I think that the town does benefit from utilizing the marine park as a marine park, and, those opportunities when a boat builder in the area gets to launch a big boat and have a big party there, that actually I would submit that is to the benefit of the town.
Well, that you can't do anyplace else either.
Right.
You can't do that at an interior venue.
Right, right.
we
So,
could
so
put
I
it
wouldn't,
out
I
on
wouldn't want to
chicken
see the baby go out with the bathwater if we throw out the
Right, yeah.
bathwater.
Well, and I think too, the other variable that could be thrown into the wedding discussion is putting a limit on the number of guests.
Right. Or the number of times we do it.
Or the
Or the number
limit,
of times we do it.
the limit of the number of square feet of the park you can take up or something like that. I think from my
Yeah.
point of view, I want the residents to be able to get down there and enjoy that park as much as they possibly can. And if there's a wedding that takes up the whole park, then they
You're
can't
gonna
do it.
you're gonna see one, I think I can't remember the date, do you?
It's a date when we wanted to do it for,
Yeah, there's a weekend coming up where the whole park is gonna get used by a wedding, and, there's gonna
That's
be a
not gonna be
huge,
popular.
it's gonna be a huge tent that's gonna take up most of the park, and it'll be up there for several days, in the middle of the summer.
That's where we
Get
get
our
our
125th anniversary.
Yeah, that's
time.
why we're doing the dinner on the bridge on a Sunday.
We could throw things off the, never mind.
Um,
But I think certainly having that variable in play, how much of the park do we take up, or limit on the number of guests, would be a tool that you could use
Yep.
to,
those are the things that I'll be coming back to you with, as
I mean, I
options.
think a
and-
small, if you have a small wedding where there's, 25 guests or something, I mean, it's not gonna be intrusive to the use of the park, and I wouldn't necessarily wanna cut that out, but I'm thinking more in terms of the big events that.
hey,
there's that guy.
That's that same ant. I think we just kill him.
Well, you got ants in your pants or
No, it's Rick sent him over.
Oh, okay.
I flipped him off the front, but somehow.
Well, do
So
we,
I'll move to direct the town manager to review the policy for renting the marine park for weddings and other events. And I'm just gonna stop there, I'm not gonna say during the peak summer months.
Okay.
I'm just gonna
Second.
eliminate that.
it's moved and seconded. And the implication is that we will have a workshop at some point, so.
Not next week.
Not next week.
Not next week, no.
It's not next week, and it's not gonna be the last week of August.
No.
and obviously we'll get the harbor committee
Yeah.
in at that workshop as well.
Yes, I think that was, well, I said with Abby and Mike, but yes, pulling in the harbor committee,
I mean, if we're gonna honor our committee structure.
yes, yeah. And we'll leave that to Rick's discretion on how to do it. What? Oh,
Nothing, but Ken, Sue Dates is involved, but I think only in processing these and being the point of contact more than manipulating it or providing input.
yeah. So the motion is there, it's been seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Okay, Rick, you got your marching order. The next one, this is to discuss and vote on a voting representative of the Camden Rockport Middle School Visioning Committee. Right now, Owen has been attending, but he hasn't been officially appointed by us to sit on that committee, therefore he doesn't have a vote. At one point, Jeff, I think you had mentioned that you might be interested also in that, but
Owen is doing a fine job.
Joanne is doing a fine
going to
job.
the
I just heard a
meetings.
retreat. So, okay, but the thing is, the question to us is, do we want to have an official voice
Yeah.
on that committee, thereby assuming some ownership of whatever recommendation comes from that committee? And I'm looking back at what happened with the last proposal that came on that, and the Camden Select Board suddenly standing up and saying, no, we don't want any part of this. And does it, would that, by appointing Owen or someone, would that limit our ability or our discretion in the future?
I think so.
No, I don't see how it,
And I suppose the only thing I would need is, what is the desire of this board as it relates to knowing that there's going to be a votable item? And do you want me to make an Owen decision, or do you want me to notify you all as soon as I know, here's this topic that's coming up, I'm going to have to vote in 3 weeks. I want to understand, am I representing this board or am I making decisions autonomously? Because either's fine by me, I just want to know where the board's at so I can speak and know how I'm speaking.
Brendan, do you have a thought on that?
My first question is just how did this come up? Was this, I mean, you just described hearkening back to
Yeah.
the previous. was
When
that all
the
it was?
earlier vote went down to defeat
Yeah.
on the, what was it, 23 million bond,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it was.
28.
Whatever.
29.
Okay, a big number.
I
The
recall
school
all of
had regrouped and created a visioning committee to, one, identify what the objections had been, and two, to come up with, as I understand it, a new design or new plan for the new middle school. And they came to us April,
Gave that presentation.
April, May, March, something like that, and gave a presentation and asked for us to appoint one of our members, if we thought appropriate,
Oh, okay, so we were asked.
to their visioning committee as a voting member to take positions on where the new direction would go.
And, well, it's a two-way conduit, not only to take positions, but also to be a conduit back to us, so that this board doesn't have the surprises that,
Yeah.
that,
I was apprehensive that assigning someone in an official capacity may have been not welcome. It sounds like the opposite is the case. Be very
Well,
welcome.
Yeah, I
It's-
think, I mean, one of the
From
issues
their
that
point,
they,
yes.
that they identified from the failure of the last vote is that there wasn't enough information spread out through the proper channels in the community for the decision to be made, or they didn't have enough input to put forth a proposal that would succeed. And so this new way of doing it, to try to include more people, is a way to
Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah.
get the right proposal out there.
One example on what Ken just said, that the previous proposal was a complete restoration of the
Yep.
Mary E. Tyler building,
Taylor.
Taylor building, which after the vote, they found out that, oh, I don't care. You know, was the typical reaction. Yeah, there was a few people that wanted it, but the majority said, we don't have any connection to it, so, you know, so they're re-looking at things like that, but they didn't really have the input, and now they're looking to have a firmer voice coming in from what they perceive, you know, the public, and we have a representation
And I was
to the public.
I was just looking through my emails when Emily Lusher, she's the,
Yeah.
you know, kind of clerk of the works of this whole thing. I was trying to see if she had mentioned whether or not Camden had approved theirs to be a voting member. I didn't see anything in there, so I can't say what the other town has done.
Good question for tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Don White's always there. Leonard shows up every once in a while.
Well, I think to your question, Owen, about, I mean, we will elect you as our representative, and then, you know, you'll vote your conscience at these meetings, but I think through the liaison process, you'll talk to us, and we may respond to what you say, and then you can take that back.
And my hope and my thought is that there will be, and I'll bring it up at our next meeting, privately as well as publicly, that we have a substantial amount of time notice before a vote. So if it is a significant anything, I can bring it to you all and we can discuss it, so I walk away knowing what I'm gonna do before I even get
Good
there.
point, good point.
Well, I'll move to to appoint Owen Casas as a voting representative to the Camden Rockport Middle School Visioning Committee.
Moved and seconded. We have further discussion? For some reason, we always seem to have our discussion before the motion. Then we have a motion and then no discussion.
Sometimes the discussion ends up altering the motion. which
Yeah,
is
well,
okay.
that may be, so, okay. Hearing no discussion, all in favor of appointing Owen? Okay. Even Owen's in favor of that.
Oh, whatever.
Good, we're now moving down well into our agenda here. The next item is to direct the town manager to resurrect the provider agency portion of the budget for inclusion in the FY 17-18 budget. A little background on this, the town used to have a specific line item, or actually it was a series of line items for provider agencies, where the town would donate to certain agencies, you know, like, Red Cross, New Hope for Women. and
American
those.
Legion.
No, never that.
Hospitality House.
Yeah,
you know,
but,
that
you know,
sort of thing.
to a variety of charitable functions that serve Rockport residents. And we would turn it to the budget committee to interview and make the recommendations. Sometimes the select board would have put a limit on, you can spend up to this amount, but no more than that. Other times they would leave it up to the budget committee to do it. Back, I want to say it was 10 years ago. It was before I came on the select board, and probably the second year I was on the budget committee. The select board at the time first put in a limit with the idea that we're going to reduce it over a couple of years, but then they immediately came back and said, nope, we're cutting it out completely. And it was a select board decision because it was a budget item, and under our form of government, the way our budget works, nobody could then come forward and say, I want to move that we donate so much to such and such, because it's just not the way our budget is set up. A few months ago, we had sort of a discussion about this. I don't know if we all, obviously, Brendan, you weren't involved in it, but I'm not sure how many of us were actually involved in it during, I think it was probably the budget discussions, as to whether or not we should be looking at reintroducing this as a budget item, which means that when we get to town meeting, the citizens have the option of saying, yay or nay. This is too much, or we don't want it at all. With the idea that, we have an obligation to the, my opinion, my words here. We have an obligation to our fellow citizens to provide for their general welfare. After all, one of our titles is the overseer of the poor. And, this is one of the ways we could, function on that. We have a couple of organizations right here in town, and I'm thinking about the Hospitality House now down here on Old County Road, which does benefit not just for our community, but for the surrounding area. And should we be considering supporting that from the purse of the town? But, again, this is something that we can decide to direct the town manager to pursue. And our packet that we received tonight has a number of different items in it that have been used over the number of years. The first one, of course, that references Board of Selectmen is obviously before the town charter came into effect. But others are in here, and these would be documents that, Rick and I assume with Stacy would work off of to move this forward if we approve it and give him the direction to do that. So I've said my piece.
I think we voted at a previous meeting to go down this road. I don't know how firm that vote was, but my suggestion, I'm in favor of it. Most of the surrounding towns have items in their budgets to do that, and Rockport sort of stands out as not having it right now, and we do get grief from some people from time to time for not doing it. The amount of monies that we give, in the past anyway, have not been huge, not been terribly substantial, and not even necessarily huge in relation to the budget of the organization that's receiving the funds. But having been on the other end of that, serving on the board of a nonprofit, I found that the value was, at least a large portion of the value was the ability to get in front of the town and tell the story about your nonprofit agency, so that people become more aware of what you do, how many Rockport residents you help, and things like that. So I think for that reason, that's a good reason to continue to do this. And I would suggest too that, we have all these old forms here, and I would suggest that if we vote to direct Rick to do this, that don't feel bound by those old forms whatsoever.
They are pretty
They're
expensive.
cumbersome, and
Yeah.
and it's extensive.
Doing.
Getting one of those
Did you get
ants.
the ant?
Yes, sir.
So I would, that would be my thought, is that don't be bound at all, Rick, by what you have seen in the past,
Yeah.
just because we always did it that way, that's not
So
necessarily.
did I hear a
These
motion?
forms grew out of earlier forms.
Right.
I will move to direct the town manager to begin the process of reintroducing the provider agency portion of the budget for inclusion in the FY 17-18 budget.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Get that?
Jeff, did you want to say something?
I
saw you
want to
put your
say
hand up.
yes, yes, and yes. No, I was going to tell a more personal story of the demise. There were always a cap. There was always in my first two terms as on the select board. There were always caps, but my last year, we squeezed out of snatched from the jaws of death, a cap that we just cut in half, and then the year after that went down to zero. So just from the history perspective. But yes, I think it's time that the town gets back to having that as part of its normal.
And the, you know, the devil's advocate position, which I don't espouse, is that, you know, that people can make their own decisions about who they want to support as
Yeah, to be
opposed
honest, I don't love the idea of taking money from the taxpayers and then deciding what to do with it, but I don't have the context, and I appreciate that there are other towns that do it. All of these organizations are clearly worthy organizations.
Yeah.
It's not being misappropriated in any way, but
And I believe, to that, Brendan, one of the things that they do is they come in and they showcase what they do specifically for
No, no,
your town.
I hear you.
No, because I agree with you. It's difficult, but when they give their presentation, from what I've heard, it's specific about the benefits that your town reaps from them existing in the community.
Yeah. And
Talk
this
like
is
the
a
amount of
direction to
people
the
they
budget
serve.
committee that they need to do all of that. You know, this is one of the things that we leave, or we used to leave, directly to the budget committee. You do it.
And I would say that that's open for discussion too. I mean, I think the whole process, if we're gonna reintroduce it, it doesn't have to be done the way it was done before. And so maybe the way it was done before is okay, I don't know, but I would like to give the manager the leeway to.
We don't have to reinvent the wheel either. There's. it's-
True. But,
Most other towns do this, and we can look at what their process is.
Okay. Do we have further discussion? We have the motion. I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Okay, consider yourself,
Two marching orders.
yes, two.
I can
Double
march all
time.
over the place.
Double time.
We now have before us, a quitclaim deed for the 18 Chickawaukee Pond Road, transferring ownership from the municipality of the town of Rockport to Michelle Gallant. And we have some of the background information to us tonight. As you recall, over a year ago, I think it was, that we decided we don't want that property.
Oh, it was more than that.
Put it
yeah.
out for bid,
Right.
yeah. And there was the high bid was put in, and then apparently there have been issues where it's fallen apart.
Right.
And so we're going to the second highest bidder, and she has agreed to take it over, under the conditions that were specified, and.
Can you explain to me why it's not going to the highest bidder?
The highest bidder was not willing to conform to the restrictions we were putting on the lot.
It's not an eligible bid then.
It was, but the way it was bid out was it was a non-buildable, you know.
It's a small
It's a
lot.
very small lot on the water, and the highest bidder bid high, but then was not willing to go with the restrictions we were putting on the lot. And as part of the deed, he just wanted it to be part of whatever the town zoning required. And it was always listed as a non-buildable lot, and that it was gonna be restricted as part of the deed, because it's easier for us to manage if it's part of the deed. And so the second highest bidder lives right across the street, diagonally across the street from the property, and she's willing to.
This property, Brendan, for your history, was taken for non-payment of taxes
Okay.
many years ago, had a small shack on it, really, and that was being generous.
Yeah.
And at one point, it was thought that the town, when it took ownership of it, we'd spent the money to demolish the shack and do a little bit of improvement to the landscaping of the land, thinking that it would be a public access point to the lake. But the problem with that was that it's on a private road, and so we couldn't have
I see.
public access that way, so
Yeah.
that's that we get to the point of, well, it's better just dispose of it.
Yeah. It was really ugly. It very narrow.
Anyway,
This room is probably as
Yeah.
wide as that lot.
Well, I'll move to approve the purchase price of $14,100 that was determined by sealed bid and sign the municipal quitclaim deed from the municipality to the town of Rockport to Michelle Gallant.
second.
Moved and seconded.
Just one question, Rick. If we have had the attorneys go through this. My only reason for asking that question is I don't wanna have the high bidder come back and say that we did something wrong and then initiate a legal action saying that we didn't do it right or something
So,
like that.
we've changed attorneys.
Okay, but I guess
So
if it has
let's-
been reviewed, then I'm okay with it.
It was reviewed previously.
Okay.
We've changed attorneys. So you might want to make it subject to that, and then you can come in once it clears their review, then you can come in and sign it. We'll let you know, and you can come in and sign it.
Okay.
And just
Look
for
at
my
this
own,
example of our fixed bid,
you're like 110% sure before they even went to this bidding portion, there were things in, these restrictions in place. They existed before we opened up the bidding process.
Yeah, it was listed as a
non-buildable
non-buildable
lot,
lot,
okay.
right.
Cool.
Yeah. It was all within the
And-
bid package.
And we always, always, always have the right to reject any or all bids. Whatever reason we decide.
And they always have the right to
Legally. we
bring
have that-
legal-
We have that right. I get that. But I mean, if we're taking less money, there needs to be a reason for it. There is a reason for it. So.
Frankly, I'm surprised we're getting as much as we're getting.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to make sure that by the action, we're not putting the town in any kind of
No.
legal liability whatsoever.
So why
because
don't
that would
you-
negate the.
We have a new attorney, and it would be,
I'm going to add to my motion then
put a yurt on it.
pursuant to
Structure.
no, that's a structure. of-
review by
Temporary.
legal counsel.
Uh,
By
second-
current legal
Don't tell the
counsel.
Second
Mongols.
retracts and reseconds.
Okay, the current motion now includes review by the current attorney.
Right.
Are we clear on the motion?
Understood.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor? We will do that. And since I didn't have in our material tonight, that quitclaim deed,
you didn't?
I did not find it.
Well, we're going to have to wait to sign it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah.
only thing I have in here is for the Maine Municipal Association, which we're gonna go to right now. We, as every year, we are entitled to vote for the new members of the Maine Municipal Association Board of Directors, and who will be moving up to be the vice president for 1 year, who then moves up to be president. We cannot write in any candidates. We need to vote for one for a 1-year term. For the vice president, we have one name before us, Linda Cohen, counselor of the city of Portland, South Portland. And then for directors, for 3-year terms, 3 people, vote for 3, James Gardner, town manager, town of Easton, Christine Lands, town manager, town of Bethel, and Mary Sabins, town manager, town of Vassalboro. I would entertain a motion to vote for all.
So move.
Any second?
Second.
Second.
Does anybody know any of these people?
No.
I know Linda Cohen. I think she is the city clerk in Portland, but she's also on the council in South Portland. I've met her several times.
Pretty heavy on these crazy town managers.
Oh, yeah, well, they're about the only people that really have the time to serve on these boards.
And I know Mary Sabins.
Oh, you do? Vassalboro, yeah.
No objections to those?
No.
You know, okay.
Their resumes were included in our packet. By virtue of their positions and that they've been nominated, I was asked if I could serve on the nominating committee, and I said, well, this is in March. Sorry, got other things we're working on here. But, you know, it is a general search. A number of people put in their request to serve on the boards or being moved up to vice president, and they're reviewed quite extensively and have a lot of exposure around the state. So, you know, even though I don't know them, I think that they'd be perfectly qualified to serve. Any further comment? Okay, all in favor of voting this? Okay, we will.
Do we need to physically sign that? Do you need to pass that around?
I can,
You
one
can-
of us
you
can
can do
sign
it
it.
on our
We can have Rick sign it, or I can sign it, and,
I'm a municipal official.
yep.
So Rick can
Or
sign
by
it,
the
or
majority of the
majority
municipal
of
offices.
the-
We don't, you guys don't need to stick around to sign that, unless you want. Didn't think so. Okay, actually, point K, I had, oh, wait.
Okay.
There is no K, never mind, never mind.
Point K.
Nice try, Bill.
Well, actually, I've got my own notes, and I had not removed that, because we're gonna discuss that tomorrow night.
Good.
We don't have any wastewater commissioners, so let's go to liaison reports. I'd like to remind you at this point, we need to be thinking about what we might want to suggest or actually put forward for the library bond. If there is gonna be a library bond, what do we think we should ask our voters to vote in favor of?
You talking about wording or dollar value or?
Dollar value, the dollar value, you know.
Is this
And-
part of your liaison?
This is a reminder, and this is the appropriate place, what I felt was the appropriate place to remind you all, we've got this coming up, on August 8th, so.
Unfortunately, your ad hoc liaison committee member for the library was not here this week during a rather important week for that group.
You saw it live stream.
You asked questions through Ricky.
I did my best. I did not attend to the public forum at all.
You know, again, obligations take you
Yep,
elsewhere.
No, by all
Fully
accounts,
understood.
it was very well organized, well run. We are meeting on the 3rd in order to finalize the recommendation to the select board, which is obviously a different question than the one that you asked. In anticipation of your question, that was why I asked Charlton if the fundraising committee had an expectation about what the bond amount would be. My impression from afar was that they had not talked about it much. Was that your impression here? But that
It's more that they're waiting for us to say how much we think the town should
But
put
I
up.
think you're about to say 50/50. I think
50/50
that's sort of
is
the
what-
prevailing, unvoiced thought is, I guess.
Again, we're really not having a discussion on it. I just want to remind you, start to think about it, because we will have that discussion on the 8th. And, that's when we're probably gonna say, this is what we're gonna do, but we're gonna hold a public hearing.
Yep.
And that's where we'll make the final decision. So, actually, in light of that, it was mentioned that maybe we want to have 2 items on the November warrant. One was the amount of the bond, and the other was, which do you like? The garden or the not garden? But that's something else to think about for the 8th.
Well, I assume that the ad hoc committee is gonna recommend one or the other.
And
that's
Yeah.
that's an interesting question. If this board is
Let's change the-
content to through me to tell them that you're perfectly happy to not have them choose one or the other, I can advertise that.
my apology, I didn't mean to create that
Okay.
situation here. Jeff?
I was actually going to vocalize that we might want to offer them sort of halfway to that, which is that they don't necessarily have to make a recommendation for one or the other prior to coming here, but it should be a joint decision, because, we take we pick up the bucket and take it from there. However, I am not ever against taking, getting as much information from the voters as possible. There's a bit of a complication in there, in that you are asking, if one of them is a bond question, that includes the amount, and is the bond $150,000 inflated from the perspective of somebody who wants to have just a fixed pitch roof?
Okay. Good question, good point.
Yeah.
Let's
But that certainly
consider
goes to
that.
the heart of my welcoming at least the conversation about, is this the time frame we want to keep to, in terms of getting all of that from the public, getting that information back?
Okay, well, to go on with our liaison reports, I actually have a number of reports to make. Of course, Midco Solid Waste has their meeting this Wednesday. There may be a follow-on meeting on August 10th back here. That's in case no decision is made and they need additional time to continue the discussion. I've already cleared it. On the original agenda, it had the zoning board of appeals meeting that night here. They have nobody coming forward, so we have the use of this space that night. I've already cleared that. And as you know, I am pushing that we have a vote before the end of August.
Well, we all are now. By virtue of the letter.
Yes. Parks Committee met. They have a concern, with the redesign or design of Memorial Park. They're not really sure if they like the idea of moving all the memorials to the front as the library plan has been proposing. But they would strongly recommend that a professional landscape architect be hired to work with them or in conjunction, or hear their input on how the Memorial Park is redesigned. And they are also looking at some improvements down here in Mary Lee. Owen?
Didn't that kind of come with the package with Dick Reed? Don't we have access to
Right.
it?
Well,
Okay.
I
Mike,
think I hear what Bill is saying more is that they want to be engaged. The
Yeah.
Parks Committee wants to be engaged.
Oh, totally,
Yeah.
but we already have, so we don't have to go and
No.
find a new landscape architect and say,
oh,
here's
no,
your person.
no,
We
they just want to.
They want
I
to
believe that's what Mike is a landscape.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Would it be appropriate for me to let the library, the ad hoc library planning committee know that,
Parks Committee.
Parks Committee would
Well,
prefer to be consulted more than they have been consulted about the,
I think it'd be more appropriate for the liaison of the Parks Committee to say, hey, if you want input in this, which is a town-wide discussion,
Show up at the
then show
meetings.
up at the meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some of them were at the, those forums, but not all of them. And they're just, because they know this is probably gonna be several years down the road, and they have concern about the trees that are there. I think, Rick, you had mentioned to me that somebody had said that nice, big, huge purple tree that's at the front, which is actually a purple birch,
Oh, yeah.
or purple beech, is junky tree, and they all are in love with it because it's mature and large and, beautiful and all that. And some of the concerns they have with taking down the oaks that are there, even though they are all been storm damaged, and one of them's held together with baling wire. I don't think there's any spit or bubble gum in there, but there's definitely baling wire.
Bird bubble.
But that's their concern, and I'll continue to work with them, because this isn't something that needs to be, resolved in the next month or two. Library committee met, and actually they had Charlton Ames there to talk about the capital campaign and the process. It was pretty much what we discussed with him on the 18th, so there was really no difference. But they did vote to transfer the money that they had been accumulating in their funds for the purpose of building a new library to the town, because the town is holding that bucket of money and that's where all the contributions will go to building of a new library. So they've just completed that action so that they can actually be out of that signing period or process.
How much money?
70,000? Yeah, there's 70,000 left. There had already been enough, and I'm not sure exactly how many thousand were taken out because of the stipends that they gave to the architects that were competing in the second round of the design phase. So, 75? Yeah, okay. So there has been some money already spent at their authorization. Now it's just turned over to the town, because we're involved, we're the ones that are responsible. We, the town, are responsible. The investment committee met also, and they are considering a very major revision to how the town money is invested. They've looked back across how the money, and it's a significant amount of money, for the wastewater, general assistance, and cemetery, is invested now through Bar Harbor Trust and Savings, and they're questioning whether we're actually getting the best return we can get because of the way most of these firms invest for $1.3 million, and they have this just very set way, and they're saying, wait, why don't we just take all that money out, and put it into a S&P 500 and a short-term bond fund and split the money up that way. Occasionally revisit to see if we need to shift it off, because it's going to produce as good a return as what we are. And instead of being paying 1%, to them of the value, we are paying maybe, that's 100 basis points. We're maybe paying 5 or 6 basis points, which is a huge difference on the amount that's being taken out when you consider what those fees are. So they're considering that, and they're going to look at it over the next couple months, and probably at their next meeting in October? August. Oh, they're having a quick meeting in August. I won't be there, but, that they are going to look at that in depth. Jeff?
Owen first.
Oh.
I didn't make it to this most recent one, but I made it to the meeting before the investment committee meeting that they had prior to this last one.
yeah.
And I feel like that was a conversation that they had at that meeting as well. So it's a continuation of reevaluating, because I knew they were going to reevaluate their relationship with Bar Harbor.
At one point, they were talking about going out to bid.
Yep.
To do it, and they've taken some look at the other towns that have similar funds and investments and saying, well, none of them have anything that would wow us into believing that they could do a better job for us than what Bar Harbor is doing now. So then they came in with this, apparently Falmouth. No,
So they're not that.
Bob Campbell mentioned that some institution that they have like 10 funds that they have their monies invested in.
Do they commingle?
Yes, well, it's all commingled, just like ours are commingled. It's just when we come back and Megan separates it out based on what the original contributions were and then divvies up
Growth,
the
yeah.
earnings. So, it's all commingled that way.
I do want to remind us that we had a meeting with Bar Harbor, and they brought it a woman who was not on their normal team, and that this board, in another iteration, if I recall correctly, was open to the idea of some social value and ecosystemic value quotients being applied to our investments, where we might not get absolutely the top dollar, or we're just shifting ownership into things that were what we felt were better long-term solutions for the earth. So I do want to say that if we do, and I have no particular opinion on the investment committee taking it out of the hands of Bar Harbor and putting it in the investment committee's hands, which sounds like a fine idea, particularly on the basis points, but that we would then hopefully utilize that as an opportunity to make a statement about what we wanted to invest in.
We'll take that back to them. Right now, what they're talking about is just an S&P 500 index fund and
Which
a
is an
short-term
amalgamation
bond.
of-
Yeah,
yeah.
it's amalgamation, and it might be Fidelity, it might be Vanguard, it may be one of the others. They did discuss for a while, did they think it should be something broader, like the Russell 2000 or something like that, which would bring in more of the lower caps. But they sort of said, we're gonna, those aren't gonna produce the best return, the way things usually go, because it's the large caps that return. But and they also have the international component within that, because most of those companies have international components to them, and therefore we're getting that worldwide. They didn't want to go into a Euro stock fund or something like that, because they didn't, the fluctuations in
Right,
the
that's-
Forex is way too much, or something like that.
The problem they found with Bar Harbor Trust is that they invest in models, and all of their investors are in the same model, and they're not essentially willing to work with us on what we feel is the best or what the investment committee feels is the best investment for the town.
At that meeting, I did notice some tension between what the woman was saying, who was saying, "Oh yeah, we could do it." The guy said, "No, we could do it."
That's all that I was gonna say, was when I had brought it up to the investment committee, they said that was one of the restricting factors, is that once you've risen above a certain pot of money. They just put you where they put everyone that gives them a huge pot of money. And for to ask special things, because I was trying to do the renewable energy investment versus fossil fuels, which they were open to, and I'm kicking myself that I wasn't at the last meeting. So
No. Okay. They also had some suggestions about how to pay for a columbarium, and I think I've communicated those to you, Ken. Because of the size that it might be of money, don't bond it, just take it out of, your budget or something like that. Or just take a short-term loan
From the investments.
from the
Yeah,
investments,
that-
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
But, we're checking that with the attorney to see how much we could do that out of the investments. Because knowing that there's gonna be a repayment,
there's
somebody buys it.
Revenue generated.
Yeah, it just has to be structured. And then the Friends of the Rockport Public Library had their meeting. They're looking at now having a second sale, but on a much smaller basis during the year, because they had a lot of good books left over. But they are also looking for space to store their books. Apparently, their contract with Swift Storage isn't being renewed, and so they're looking for a number of, right now, this year, they had at the end 5 of the 5x5 lockers down there. And Swift apparently has to take something, that we can't guarantee you having all of those. So they're looking at other options for storage. So that's my report. I'll look to Brendan.
So we covered at the ad hoc library planning committee. I've been just to the one meeting. You guys have seen them more recently than I have, but we'll get together again on the 3rd with the goal of having a clear recommendation and wording for the select board for, I think it's the 8th.
Yes.
I have been brought up to speed, made my first meeting with conservation. It was actually concurrent with the harbor committee meeting, so I sort of tried to dash in between, but I know the folks on the harbor committee better, so that I asked them if it was okay if I caught up to speed after, which is what I did. I do have a question for everyone here. It appears to me as though the Conservation Commission is pretty close to a one-issue effort right now around Goodies Beach. And I'm wondering whether or not everyone here is aware of that, whether or not, I'm confident that that issue is being addressed. I'm gonna meet with Rick and Jamie this week to talk about the feasibility study that Gartley and Dorsey is doing about the amount of the water runoff and what possibly could be done, various ways that it could possibly be addressed. What I don't have is the historical context of what that group used to work on prior to the Goodies Beach, and whether there are things being neglected.
Well, it's actually, it may seem like a one issue this meeting, but they did spend an awful lot of time on ecological care of lawns in the past several months,
Yep.
culminating with the event that was held here, so.
We did talk about how that momentum was going to be retained.
And one of the suggestions that I had when we were doing that is we talked mostly about lawn care, and people have vegetable gardens too, and obviously they don't want to plant vegetables and then have the critters come and eat them all, and
Yep.
they don't get any benefit from it. So that may be one suggestion you could bring back to them, is to continue on. I do think they want to have an educational component to what they do. And so that would be another way to handle that, maybe vegetable gardens or flower gardens or
Yep.
something like that.
It wasn't fair for me to describe it as totally one issue. They did bring it
And
up
there are
as well.
other sort of statutory things that they have to do. They have to walk the easements in
Yep.
December, which they typically will do, and they also have, the jurisdiction, for example, on the sale of any town property. They have the ability to come in and say, well, for conservation reasons, we don't think that should happen or whatever.
Yep.
Did they elect a new chair?
Yep, new chair is Kim Kimball. So we're
You're on TV.
we're in good hands.
Well, Ted did a great job for a lot of years, but I think it's nice to have
Yep.
a change in that. It always energizes a committee, I think. and
Ted's going to remain as vice chair, and We have, I think, a significant injection of energy and enthusiasm from Laura Laffin. And I apologize that I'm blanking on the name of the treasurer who is not, was not present at the meeting because he's laid up, I think, with a
Oh,
health.
Fred Ryback.
Fred.
Oh, yeah.
Is going to remain as treasurer, and we'll have a revolving secretary.
To give you just
Yeah.
one more information on the historical context, that committee was in its waning years for about 5 years as the stalwarts of the previous iteration were just, tired and had been asked to do so much for so many years. So it got to a point where that committee would meet for the questions that our legal aspects had them do it, sale of property and this, that, and the other thing. So it has seen a wonderful phoenix-like rise, and it shouldn't, it shouldn't be any sense of complaint that they're only doing one thing. It should be now that they're,
Oh, yeah,
have a lot
no,
of
I really-
traction.
This is what I needed, was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
to, make sure that I wasn't missing,
Yeah.
trying to steer any conversations. I will say there's a shared concern about the timescale of the Goodies Beach, and in particular the.
In terms of how long it's dragged on, or?
Yeah, I'm thinking, yes, definitely in terms of how long it's dragged on, and in particular, how long it's taken to get I'd be happy to share that. I got a timetable from them. If you guys would like to see it, I'd be happy to. It surprised me. It appears to be moving pretty slowly.
That's been a concern of them for a while, that some of the staff portions of it were dragging a little bit.
Did any of the presentation from the water quality people help alleviate any of those concerns? The whole thing that you and I were both at,
No, I don't think so.
that late night with the
No, I mean,
cupcakes?
I guess
You
the
looked-
concerns
you
that I'm
looked shacked at that point,
describing-
but we all were.
Yeah, the concerns that I'm describing really have to do with the amount of time that has passed with regard to the feasibility study, that the funding for which exists. But there's no reason to jump ahead. I'm going to meet with Jamie and Rick in a couple of days to find out how to sort of make sure that that is getting the attention that it needs. Harbor Committee. I had a long walk of the Harbor Park with Mike and Abby, and was very impressed with their sort of long-term goals and consistency of goals. Rick already mentioned the parking, which is definitely a priority. They are very sensitive to what I presume is some of the select board's concern about not, sacrificing green space in order to get the parking, but the parking is clearly an issue. I volunteered because of my background and skill set in this area to get the CAD files from Landmark and prepare essentially a CAD blank for them, drawing blanks that they can use to sort of toy around with various iterations about expanding the dinghy storage, dinghy space.
Is
I
that
will-
the dinghy or the kayak? The
No, it's
dry
actually-
land stuff or the one, stuff on the
No,
water?
stuff in the water.
Okay.
Abby brought it to my attention that there are a couple of moorings that actually were left vacant this year because the owners couldn't get dinghy space. So that's an unfortunate use of resources there. But it's tricky. I mean, it's hard to figure out exactly how to do this without, privileging wealthy people, basically, and we got to figure that part of it out. I will say, from my own, this is not the Harbor Committee's perspective. This is my perspective. It strikes me that that's a pretty inefficient use of an awful lot of water. the way we're currently using it. I think we can get, Abby and I Mike walked and looked, I think there's room to get plenty of dinghies without, plenty more dinghy storage space without doing anything about that, the way those tie-offs are currently done. But if any of the members of the public want to bend my ear about it, that's my opinion. We, we have the luxury of being inefficient, but I would like for that to change over the long term. So I think part of that, like CAD plan that we're talking about, I think maybe putting it on a magnet board and cutting out, little dingy spots so that they can communicate with Rick, they can communicate with us. Here's the various things that we're looking at. There is an ongoing concern that we are taking money from people every year where there is basically no prospect of them ever getting off of that dinghy list, unless we do something differently. And I don't know that we can't do that, but everybody on the harbor committee just feels a little reticent about this 50-person list when year after year, like I think the last 3 years, I don't think there's been any turnover. So they're trying to figure out what to do with that. And that was all basically the last few minutes of the meeting because I had been in conservation prior to that. And that is my report.
Have you had a tour of the town yet?
I have had a tour of the town. Everything except for the library, which I haven't had an official tour of, but my family goes to all the time.
Geez, you're on it. I still haven't done mine.
It was actually a lot of fun,
Oh, I did a couple,
It's
and they
very
were fun.
educational.
particularly with Mike driving around. I mean, I actually didn't know what you guys were talking about for the first couple of meetings until I drove around with Mike, and then I knew I understood everything. You should do it.
You
Oh, I did Mike. It was
didn't
worth it.
get to drive with Steve.
The drive with Steve is 3 times longer and 10 times
But you get
more,
the whole history of the
Yeah,
town,
yeah.
going all the way back to 1700 somewhere,
Yep.
but it's very cool.
because he's always been involved with the
Apple
roads.
trees were planted at the beverage farm.
Yeah.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going down your side of the road.
Okay,
here.
so the first one is the American Legion. I know, but whatever. So the monument's still not moved. I don't know what we're waiting on. I thought that I had said that the Legion's not waiting on anything. Once it is moved, they will scramble and put something together.
What we're waiting on is now that the owner of the the owner of the property now has decided he wants to keep it on his land. The other guy is not, it's like, really?
I went down there today and it looked like almost all of the, what do you call it, arborvitae that were around there.
Right.
they're hacked.
There's like there's just one little scrawny one left.
And it seems like when I don't have time, JJ's open. When I do have time and I stop in and he's not open, I can't, there's cars there and I can't get anyone to come out and talk to me from the house.
Apparently Jamie's working on it.
Okay.
Jamie's been working on it. And apparently he's put some time and effort into landscaping around the thing and it works now for him. And the neighbor next door that was saying, yes, you can put it here, is like getting his sister to sign off is not as easy. It's just like, really?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
As long as we're doing something.
Whatever happens, let's rededicate it on Veterans Day, okay?
The rec committee, they have not met since we approved the funding. That's for a handful of reasons. We've been working with Suzanne Jondro, the newest member, to quasi-act as chairperson to start putting the meetings together, so I don't have to. There is a bit of a learning curve with that. And so I've been working with her. I've shifted over to Rick.
I'm gonna meet with her this week sometime.
8:30 on Thursday morning.
Oh, okay.
And I know this because I asked her to propose various different times over a 3-day span, and she chose Friday night. Of the 6 different options I gave her, she chose Friday night, which is totally fine, except no one can make it. So what I'd actually, the last thing I left was maybe we could meet at 8. Rick could come to the MRC at 8:30, and we could all have a powwow and then she doesn't have to bring anyone up to speed, and I don't know where it'll all go. I've also tried to, I gave her Dave Jackson's contact information as well as called Dave beforehand to say, can you spend some time with her as a longstanding committee chair to just help her, because she's never served on a committee, let alone been a chair of a committee. So trying to, shorten the learning curve time frame is where we're at, but we should have a meeting by the end of the week. Parks Committee, I know I'm no longer the liaison, but when I was talking with Dave Jackson, I asked him about the potential for grants specific to the park portion of the library concept, similar to how we may break the roads out for some grants. According to him, he did not believe that there were many, if any, options of us to apply for stuff specific to park renovation. He said he'd take a look, but he wasn't thinking there was much hope. Yeah. Pathways, I've spent virtually this entire meeting trying to remember what it was we talked about at the Pathways, and I wrote blank, double blank, and tomfoolery. So we did something there. I'm just not quite sure what it was, so not too much of importance. The only thing is, I feel like we should, Pathways, myself, the towns, including Camden, should use what's going on at the Maritime Farms sidewalk extension from Corey Hill with the joint town and the grant. It should be a really good and you're awesome, just by the way, just so you know. As a good learning experience on how to not have this happen again, because it's been a very difficult process to understand where we're at in the process, who's doing what, who speaks for who, what are we getting, what are we doing, and at the end of the day, if we sit on our hands as DEP, or are they just gonna roll out some asphalt and we've got a place to walk and it's not at the end of the, so it's been a complicated one, that project specifically.
Well, the biggest problem with that was the grant was awarded 3 years ago,
And
but
then-
for 4 to 5 years out, and of course then the town personnel all changes through that period of time.
So-
and nobody with any memory is, any institutional memory is there anymore. So that's
Good,
really difficult.
but good learning experience. The middle school visioning committee. So here's the basic time frame or timeline. What we're trying to do between now and January is push as much information out to the public once we've got it good and packaged the way that we want to get feedback from the public about the three options that we have. Patching, which is virtually the do nothing option, which does carry substantial cost. Significant restoration, which we've narrowed down restoration options to one restoration option. That is, there were ones that substantial renovation costs came up to new construction costs. So we all said we might as well scrap that one. There's no point to not get anything that we want as far as ergonomics, the ability for people to move around if it's going to cost the same as building new. So we scrapped and picked the only kind of economic renovation one. And the new construction, which we have had some circle conversations about Mary Taylor building. If we're gonna tear it down, does that open up new options for a better school design? If there's space over here, is that a conversation that we wanna have? Who makes that decision? Do we just shift it to the school board and let them make a decision? Do we get input or not? But by January of 2017, the hope is that we have presented information, received feedback, and as a visioning committee, we'll choose one of those three options: patch, restoration, or new construction. One thing that I thought was super interesting and definitely worth bringing up, and we'll bring it up more during these conversations. So when I came back the last time, and I'm sorry I talked super duper quick, Diane, I apologize. The number for new construction had changed, and not a little bit. It changed by $3+ million. And so I'm like, okay.
Up or down?
Up. So I said, so what did you all add back in? Would you throw the bus barn back in? So, nothing.
It's the cost of
Construction costs increase over 4-year time frame, 3% each year. The guy was like, I'm sorry, I ran the numbers that I had to run and it made my eyes pop out. So new construction cost jumped up from high 22 million to low 26 million.
And that was also the reason they did it on the timing that they did. They could pick up effectively another year on the vote if the vote had gone positive.
And so with interest rates, what they were arguing last time, historically low, they're still definitely low, but they're gonna use that as another selling feature of, we've got to do something, because eventually, even if we patch or restore, at some point we'll have to do a new, and then this will be a 37, 38, 39 million dollar project versus doing it now.
That's not the estimates.
Oh, it's all, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody listening at home,
Off the top
that's
of
not
my
where it's
head.
up to. It's only somewhere still in the 20s.
And once we get our decision made in January, we will use the January to November 2017 timeframe to lay out and push to the public and try to get the public aware of the proposal that the Visioning Committee selected. And the only other thing is, if anyone has clever ideas of organizations in town, groups in town that representatives of the Visioning Committee could present to, here's an example. We're going to be trying to get 10 minutes before or after, or possibly even the whole time, of that same business, Chamber of Commerce business breakfast where Angus King was speaking. Maybe not with an A-lister like Senator Mitchell or something like that, but if we get a B-list speaker, we can probably capitalize on it. So those are the type of things we're trying to do. Find big groups of people that are involved in the community, present the information so they can chew on it and give us feedback before January 2017, so we have as much information. So if you have any good ideas, we'd love to present the information to any group you think is applicable. I got my hair cut. Lowell Jones told me something awesome that I needed to put on the ballot, and I totally made sense, and then I completely forgot it. So I'll go back and talk to Lowell about
Cut
that.
that part of the brain off.
Yeah. And again, well, his brother's got the razor to my head. He finally gets onto the rah, 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 and I was like, can you give me a second before I respond? And you and I will talk about something that's been on my head that maybe the Conservation Commission can look at. And I'm done. Thank you.
Ken?
ORC had their first and last summer meeting last week. There were 3 items on the agenda: the sidewalk ordinance, the road acceptance ordinance, and looking at hotels. Sidewalk ordinance, they are gonna recommend that we simply repeal the existing sidewalk ordinance and end it. The thinking there being that much of the stuff in the ordinance, they thought didn't need to be in an ordinance, that it could be determined by the select board or by the staff. I mean, right now, we have responsibility for, helping the public works decide what to do with roads and things like that, and they're thinking that could be similar for sidewalks. The other thought on that is for new development, that sidewalk requirements could be included in the subdivision ordinance, and in fact already are at some level, I believe.
As the former liaison to the Pathways Committee, do you accept or question or reject that recommendation?
I think it's okay, actually, because there's some things in there, for example, that, the ordinance says, well, you have to plow the sidewalks. So we make that decision at budget time about, appropriating money to plow the sidewalks. There are other things in there about, best practices for building sidewalks, which, you put that in an ordinance, and then the best practice change, you have to change the ordinance.
I thought we countered that with just saying best practices.
Yeah, we did to a certain extent, but,
Instead of getting into a discussion of this, they will be bringing these recommendations
Right.
to us
Yeah.
at our September meeting or late
I mean,
August
the
meeting.
existing sidewalk ordinance had to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It had to be either discarded
Yeah.
or replaced, and so
we'll-
that we could, if we wanted to, we can consider this as a one-step process and then do it later, but, their thought wasn't, and Will Gartley in particular expressed, a strong willingness to come before the select board and explain some of his reasoning on that. The road acceptance ordinance, Jamie had put together, some of the things that I had suggested, which was waiving that 50% requirement, if the road connected to town roads, down to 25%. And they accepted that. They thought that was good. The other thing we added, and this was somewhat at Rick's suggestion, because Rick and Jamie and I met, was a requirement for a town road to be accepted that it has to be connected to another town road. And that may sound a little funny, but we have a situation right now where one road, Scheibel's Lane, I think it is fully developed. But it's not connected to another town road because the old Nut Farm Road is not fully developed, doesn't meet the 50% requirement. So the people on the Scheibel's Lane could, by the current ordinance, ask to have the road accepted, but then the town would not be able to get there to plow it because it wouldn't be connected to another town road.
And as I recall, Old Nut Road, Nut Farm Road isn't wide enough at some point to be accepted, or something like that. There's another
So
reason, yeah.
at any rate, that we added that requirement in, and the other reason for doing that was, you know, if you have a subdivision or a portion of a road and part of the road has the 50% criteria met, but the rest of it doesn't, you don't want to be approving a road that's isolated from any other town road.
Okay.
So they did that. They changed the wording a little bit about police chief, fire chief, and public works approving the waiver of the 50% rule, putting it in another part of the ordinance to say that the select board, when, you know, should consider the recommendations of those people, and so that makes all the sense in the world. The hotel issue, we had talked about possibly allowing hotels in the downtown district. Stuart Smith came to the ORC meeting. As for those who don't know, he's purchased the property here and has a desire at some time to build a hotel on one of the vacant lots that are here right now. The concern with the ORC was that we didn't want to blanket approve hotel as a use for fear that at some future time that all the properties here would become hotels and there would be nothing else downtown. So we talked about the possibility of putting a limit on the number of hotel rooms that would be allowed in the district as its entirety, because we all agreed that a hotel in downtown Rockport could be a very positive development for the downtown, but we all agreed that we want a vibrant commercial district down here with other, you know, restaurants and perhaps some retail space, and that a hotel possibly could help support that. And then in the last question that I asked Stuart is, what's his timeline? And his timeline says, well, it depends on who you ask, but realistically it's probably a couple of years. And so the committee decided at this point there was no urgency to put something on the ballot for November. So they are that's probably gonna be a request for the select board to put that on the work for the fall term, to look at that, and possibly separating off the Central Street portion, making it a separate zoning district as opposed to the waterfront areas, because nobody wants a hotel down on the waterfront. They wanna keep the working waterfront, things like that.
Does the
So-
town have any capacity to leave the permissions as they are, but issue a waiver?
Yeah, it's called contract zoning, and it has a lot of pitfalls to it.
Sounds a lot like spot zoning.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So we did talk about that possibility, but I think it's cleaner to write something that's gonna last for a long time. And Stuart, by the way, spoke that he's in favor of a vibrant commercial district as well. He said he's renewed all his leases with the tenants in the Shepherd block. And he
I read
intends
that off,
to keep Union Hall when he acquires that in the same way, and so he wants to do that, but, you know, he may not own it forever, and so, you know, we're looking at the possibility of saying, well, what happens when an owner, you know, 40 years down the road comes along, and then, again, it's
Okay.
not wanting to have the monolith area down here.
But to answer your question, basically, if it's not, there's only two ways. If it's not, it's either it's allowed by special exception, or it's a variance. And variance only comes in with financial, you know, I can't.
Hardship.
Yeah, hardship thing. So if it's not enumerated in the special exceptions, and the special exceptions is where it sounds they're sort of modeling it after, because it says you can have it, but it has to be reviewed so that, you know, there aren't 7 gas stations in a row, you know, that sort of thing. But if it's not enumerated at all, then
do
no,
it,
it's
yeah.
not.
And to remind everybody, September 21st, it's a Wednesday, is where we're planning on having our ORC Winter Agenda Development Workshop.
So that will come back, and we'll have the proposal to repeal the sidewalk ordinance and to amend the road acceptance ordinance.
And I can put that on the August 22nd agenda?
Yeah, I believe, well,
Okay.
we'll talk about that.
Okay, well, you know.
We'll just look at the time
Yeah.
frames, yeah, so.
But sometimes we have to
they're
take the
done.
vote to
Yeah.
put it into the public hearing to be
Right,
able
yeah,
to
whatever
carry
the
it forward.
timing works for that.
Yeah.
The time, the work is done. Legacy Rockport has not met. They did sponsor the jazz concert upstairs this past weekend,
Super.
which was not as well attended as I had hoped. It did come out in the black, but not a huge amount. But it was a great concert, and we're hoping maybe that they'll come back and everybody who was there will come again.
Bring friends.
Some people who knew the band came from quite some distance to see the concert, including Big Al from Wisconsin.
Big Al was there?
He was there, sitting right in front of me.
Jeez.
Yeah, he was up and dancing and the whole bit. So that's Legacy Rockport. Did raise some money for the library. It was a fun event. Worked well in the Opera House venue. Cemetery Committee has not met, but we have directed them to do some work. Let's see, what else have I got? Ambulance Review hasn't met. I think I'm done.
Ambulance review did not meet. Oh, sorry. The Opera House Committee met in between our last meeting and now, but I was off on a shoot, so, and I asked for minutes but didn't get anything, so, very brief. Other committee, the Planning Board did not meet, and end of meeting.
Speaking
Vote
of
to adjourn, no.
Opera House, I got the question from Rick about the concert, and was the air conditioning adequate, and it was quite adequate.
Oh, yeah, it was quite
It
comfortable
was
up
quite
there.
comfortable. In fact, there was one lady who complained that it was too cold, so she.
Well,
wanted-
get up and dance.
Hey, the library,
She, actually, what she did
when
was
we
she
had the
got
library
safety vest out of
presentation,
this box
I
office
felt
and
like
wore
that
that.
whole meeting room was nice,
Right.
properly controlled during that whole library
Oh, yeah.
presentation. It was very comfortable.
It wasn't the night you guys were there, it was stifling
It was
outside.
very muggy
Muggy.
outside, yeah, and it was quite comfortable inside, and we were very careful about controlling the doors and not keeping them wide open, you know.
Yep.
Had the interior doors, exterior doors open to welcome people, but the interior doors shut, and that did seem to help.
But they were a very good jazz band. Really enjoyed it. So, nothing further. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Seconded,
it
moved
was
by
a
many,
unanimous
seconded
motion.
by many, all in favor. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.